Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
The Leaf Spring Army sends their regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back today at 4:57 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine, and we have some pretty big news today, as we have seen that the Ukrainians have been able to clear the canal zone around the area of Kreminna, which is a little bit of an extra distance behind Klishkivka to the east, and we have also seen a little bit of additional footage showing the Ukrainians most likely using storm shadows on the port cities of Mariupol and Berdyansk, and we've also seen a little bit of extra something else, kind of carrying on with what happened in Belgrade a little while ago. But of course, it is great to all have you all here once again with us tonight, and without further ado, let's get right into the news, starting off in the Black Sea again, because many of you all have heard about the ship Incursion being hit. We actually did see video footage, and unfortunately due to the amount of news that we had tonight, those videos were not included, that the Incursion, supposedly according to Russian media, has returned to the port of Sevastopol and has no visible, I guess you could say, wounds to the rear of the ship. They actually showed the specific part that the kamikaze drone hit, and it shows no damage whatsoever, not even burn marks from a very close explosion. Some people have been saying that that footage was doctored, and unfortunately, once again, I was not able to include it, but we do have additional backup footage from the Ukrainian armed forces, once again showing explosions occurring near and on the Incursion at sea. And so with that, here's the video. Right here, we can see the Incursion in the distance. This may be another kamikaze drone that was taking a video, and we can see what appeared to have been an explosion over here to the, I believe it would be the port side of the ship. I'm not really sure which side is the left side ship-wise, port or starboard, but we can see I guess you could say the plume of an explosion, although the camera is at a very low quality, where it does appear that that kamikaze boat was able to hit the stern of the Incursion and cause a decent amount of damage.
And also, real quick, Enforcer, I see a lot of people saying that they're having chat issues. Just know that it's not just you, it's everyone right now. Apparently, YouTube is having a minor issue with that. So hopefully it gets cleared up pretty soon.
And I also would like to make a quick little note about that. A lot of people tonight, even during our 10-minute countdown, was saying, hey, what's up with the chat having so many errors? I've got to be honest with y'all, I really don't have an idea. It most likely is some kind of a technical issue that YouTube is dealing with. And so if you would like, you can probably refresh the stream, and that may fix the issue. Or you can hop on and hop off and hop back on real quick, and that might also fix the issue as well. If it doesn't, it may just be a YouTube-wide problem that they're not able to fix right now. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that additional video of the Incursion, and we're now going to be moving on into the area of Rostov-on-Don, and starting off with a Su-25 that appears to have not had that fun of a day over Ukraine. We're not really sure where this Su-25 was damaged over the skies of Ukraine, but we did see that it had finally returned, and it doesn't appear that this Su-25 will be flying again. It appears that a manpad literally chewed this thing up, and the entire rear section of the Su-25 was mauled by a manpad. At least that's what we've been told. This Su-25 has taken such a large amount of damage, it is possible that the airframe may be trashed and they never use this Su-25 again. And so as far as we can tell, this may be another Russian aircraft that was knocked out of the war, although the pilot was able to limp it home, although barely from what we can tell, because the damage on this thing is significant. It looks like the blast even took apart the top rudder section of the Su-25. And real quick, let's just pull up a normal Su-25 and take a look at one. And it certainly did take something off the top of that vertical stabilizer, because if we look at a picture of a similar Su-25 variant right here, this is just the Su-25 as opposed to the Su-25T, which has a more pronounced hump shape in its fuselage near the cockpit. This thing appears to be that version, and it appears that the top part of the vertical stabilizer just sheared off in the explosion. So really neat to see, really interesting to know that they're also once again able to knock out Russian aircraft, and while not shooting them down and causing them to become a fireball, still making sure that they will not be used in the war. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news within Rostov-on-Don, where we also saw the city of Rostov-on-Don is on fire. Now, sadly, it's not the Su-25 that was in that video that caused the fire, but we can see in the early morning traffic in the town, a large fire within the city, billowing a large black plume of smoke, letting us know that it is not an ammunition fire, it was burning. And so with that, here's the clip. And we can see the large fire continuing to burn, and sadly, we don't really get a lot of information about what this fire is exactly. And let's see here. 1 second, just had to check something. And wait, hang on, let me go. Let's see. All right, 1 second, just had to make sure I took a real quick look at something. But still, really interesting to see that there was a fire in Rostov-on-Don. Nothing to worry about. Just had to make sure to check that real quick. But with that,
Rostov on fire, son.
I had to look at my email where Kadyrov was going, "When were you talking about this at Don? This is a town named after what they say at Don. That is wrong at Don." You know, I wonder, is there a guy called Rostov, and does he sit on Kadyrov? Because if so, I think we found out where that happened. Right here in Rostov-on-Don. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into the city of Mariupol, or the largely destroyed city of Mariupol, where we saw a large explosion occurring here. And there has been a lot of talk that this is once again another use of a Storm Shadow missile. Mariupol, throughout the larger part of the war, after the Battle of Mariupol unfolded within the first few months, has been out of the range of every single kind of Ukrainian munition except for the Tu-141. Today we saw that a large explosion originated within the city of Mariupol, and we do not know the exact explosive that blew this up, but it is possible that it was a Storm Shadow missile considering the range from the front lines. And you see the mushroom cloud rising over the city of Mariupol out there in the distance. And that's the end of the clip. But still, really nice to see that the Ukrainians were able to strike some kind of a Russian installation in the area of Mariupol and hopefully cause significant damage, although we don't have the exact details as to what kind of damage that may be. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of news down in the port of Berdiansk, where we got an additional video of the explosion that we saw occur yesterday. And so here is the, I guess you could say, additional clip or supplementary clip to the explosions we saw yesterday. And we can see the explosion right there. And unfortunately, just like Mariupol, nothing much is known about why this facility exploded, what the facility was made of, and what kind of damage was really caused. So once again, we really don't have any good idea. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from the port city of Berdiansk, where we can see the Ukrainians are still striking military targets, along with Mariupol. And from what we may be able to, I guess you could say, understand from this in a limited sense, although we're not getting a massive amount of information, is that considering that both of the ports were struck within the course of 48 hours, it may be a Ukrainian attempt to ensure that Russian ship supplies moving through the Sea of Azov are not able to, I guess you could say, build up stocks at the ports all too well, because these supplies are being destroyed at the ports they're in. So that may be the reason why we're seeing these attacks, but once again, we really don't have an exact idea, because not enough information has come out about what's happening within the port city of Mariupol and Berdyansk, and what was hit, and what kind of equipment may have possibly been destroyed. We're now going to be moving on into the border area of Russia, Российской Федерации, where we saw something fairly interesting today before we get on into, I guess you could say, somewhat older clips, except for this one. This one is also from today. But in the area around Novaya Tovolzhanka, trying to make sure I get that name correct, there was the sound of large firefights and, I guess you could say, shelling that was heard from that village. From what we may be able to gather here, and I'll bring y'all to this area on Google Maps, there is a border checkpoint here, kind of like there was in the area of Grivoron. Now, of course, many of y'all may know that at the area of Grivoron, a small firefight occurred and the Russian border guard forces were pushed out of the border checkpoint and on further into the Russian Federation itself, pretty much retreating all the way back about halfway towards Belgorod by the end of it. We're not really sure what's going on right now at this moment, but a video did come out from the neighboring village right over here of Novaya Tovolzhanka, where you could hear the sounds of firefights happening not that far away, and it's not entirely impossible to say that these firefights may have been happening at the Shebekino border checkpoint. And so with that, here is that clip. And once again, it's more so not really, I guess you could say visual evidence, but audio evidence that something is happening in this area. And so here's the clip. We can hear the sound of, I guess you could say, heavier arms firing, most likely a BMP autocannon or something similar. And now we can hear an artillery shell go rocketing over the camera woman, and we can now hear it explode in the distance.
завод, что ли?
We now hear another shell flying over.
Черт!
And with that, that's the end of the clip right there, but fairly interesting to see that they've been having a little bit of a skirmish near the Russian border. Once again, we really don't know a lot about this, but if we were to take a fair assumption at what may be going on in this video, it would not be out of the question to say that it may be the Freedom of Russia Legion forces and the RDK once again making another border incursion. In my honest opinion, based off of what we've seen so far, the FOR and RDK forces did meet their initial goal. I guess you could say their goal of being able to take a sizable amount of Russian territory in the Belgrade Oblast, hold it for a short while, and then retreat. But I do not believe that their secondary goal was achieved, which is to move Russian armed forces from out of the Ukrainian front lines and into the Russian border areas to try and strengthen, I guess you could say, border security for the Russian Federation. I do not believe that that goal may have been achieved because we have not seen any, I guess you could say, video or picture evidence proof, although that would be very hard to come by, showing that the Russian forces are now relocating en masse to the border region where they'll practically be useless and inactive. This may be another attempt by the Freedom of Russia Legion and the RDK to move across the border, cause another mass panic for the Russians, showing the lack of border security that the Russian Federation currently has in between the borders of Ukraine and Russia, and force the Russian government's hand in moving more of their forces out of Ukraine or out of other operational theaters within Russia and into the border region of Ukraine. This, of course, would be a great benefit to the Ukrainian armed forces because that will ensure that either the Russian forces are able to engage less of their own forces on the field, or the Russians will have practically no existent reserves to deal with whatsoever if the Ukrainians were to conduct a counterattack. And so this may be an indication that the Freedom of Russia Legion and also its, I guess you could say, accompanied unit are once again trying to cause a stir within the Russian propaganda circles and within the Russian government itself. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the area of Kolotilovka. Look, an old Soviet town, Matthew. Kolotilovka. And we saw here that the Russian...
Old Soviet. Let's go roam around it into the dangerous areas.
Yes, let's roam around it until I get stabbed with a shiv. But anyways, we can see that they were able to destroy some surveillance equipment near the border area today. So we're going to mute that real quick. And we now see the drone making his way in towards the surveillance tower and striking the equipment right on top of it, right there. The explosion, considering that surveillance equipment is usually quite fragile, was most likely destroyed. We can see another one coming in on another post, it appears, and hitting it from below. We can now see the footage taken by drone probably as the attack happened, and let's see what we see. And it appears that they're actually hitting another tower instead.
Does that mean I can't call on my phone then?
Does that mean he's not coming on then? But still, with that, that's the end of that little clip, and once again, great to see that the Ukrainian SSU has been able to continue to destroy Russian surveillance checkpoints and systems on the border, and making sure that the Russians have absolutely no idea what is going on the other side of the border as far as they are concerned. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into some more unfortunate news. Usually we try not to cover unfortunate news, but things like this are always important to note and once again bolster the idea and the understanding of why the Ukrainians are fighting this war so doggedly. Some people out there want the Ukrainians to just roll over and quit. And I don't really understand that premise whatsoever because I don't know how that benefits anyone. Other people don't really understand because the war's been going on so long why the Ukrainians keep fighting it. And they say that it's an endless, hopeless war, which also doesn't really make any sense either because it's only been 457 days long. But these video clips right here in the city of Dnipro are once again proof as to why the Ukrainians continue to fight and why the Ukrainians will never yield to Russian forces as long as they still have breath in their bodies and an ability to carry on. Today we saw a Russian cruise missile directly targeted at a hospital inside the Dnipro area, hitting it directly. This is one of the first video clips taken, and it is made directly after the missile struck the building.
And those birds are getting out.
And they are.
Just more war crimes that Russia is doing.
And we can see the smoke billowing out of the building right there. And later on, first responders would arrive, and they would begin to try and help out the wounded and, of course, the dead. Fortunately, in this attack, only 2 Ukrainian citizens were killed, to make sure that the wordage is correct. But of course, 2 is far too many. It's lucky, though, that it is not like an attack like we used to see, for example, at the Kramatorsk railway station, where 50 citizens were killed, and at the Kharkiv, I guess you could say, food distribution center, where another 51 people were killed in missile attacks. It is still a war crime, nonetheless, and an atrocity to think that the Russians would go out of their way to directly attack a hospital, a medical facility, in the middle of Dnipro, which is nowhere near the front lines whatsoever. The front lines, are as far away from Dnipro as around 80 to 100 miles right now. And so there was no reason or no plausible explanation whatsoever to a Russian missile targeting a hospital that is 80 to 100 miles away from the front lines. It is absolutely despicable. And of course, hopefully, Russian forces will pay dearly for doing this, and the Russians who are accountable for this attack directly will hopefully be able to be held accountable either during this war, after this war, or be found on the battlefield. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into our third clip of this, where we can once again see the heavily damaged building. And we can see the fire raging right there. And we can see the Ukrainian first responders moving around the building. And once again, they are in the process of evacuating the wounded and the dead from the building in this clip. I'd also like to make a quick note that 2 dead is only the current number. That number could rise as evacuation attempts and rescue attempts are underway. The numbers usually rise for the next 48 hours until they get their final number of killed, wounded, and the people who made it out with no injuries whatsoever. But it's very important to remember that these kinds of situations are the reason why Ukraine continues to fight the Russians until the very last, and also a good example of why the Ukrainians should continue to fight on until the very last, because if they want this to make it to the rest of their country, then they will, if they give up, then this will be making it to the rest of their country, to make sure to try and word that as best I can. Sometimes the words don't come out well. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from Dnipro and on into... And let me make sure I'm not skipping over anything here, because I feel like there was international news tonight, and there isn't. We're now going to be moving on into the area of our location unknowns. And starting off with our first clip, we saw some Russian missiles being shot down, or more so, a compilation of Russian missiles being shot down. And also I have to mute that because of the music, but we can see a Russian caliber flying over, and we can now see them lining up Purine to shoot it down, firing, and we can now see the cameraman lifting his camera back up, and there is the caliber being taken down. A very nice shot. We now see another caliber flying over. This one also shot down. And I also like to say that these videos are a compilation of I guess you could say, all of the film missiles that have been shot down. And while there are some older clips involved in this, it is still amazing to see Ukrainian air defense in action, making sure to save the lives of Ukrainians across the entirety of the country. We now see them lining up another manpad, and y'all may actually remember this one. This was the first time in history that a person was able to shoot down a cruise missile with a manpad. This is that video, and so here's the clip. We now see him firing the manpad. And we can now see the missile being destroyed right there. And that was a long flight. That thing almost didn't catch it, and they were very lucky. We can now see a Gepard shooting down a Shahed 136 right there. Of course, we've seen that video before. An incredibly cool one, and one of the first times we saw the Gepard in action in this war. And I gotta say, I really like Gepards, man. Those things are so cool.
They're pretty cool. They're really unique looking, I will say. What is that thing?
We can now
is that
see
a jet?
That is an SU-27 shooting down a, I believe it was a Shahed 136. This was over the area of Odessa back in the day, and I gotta say, that was really cool to see as well. We can see the plume of smoke from the Shahed. We can now see another caliber flying over, and that one being blown out of the sky. We can see another clip. This one was taken from November of 2022, where a caliber was shot down by a manpad again.
Those calibers are really slow, surprisingly.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't believe it, but Tomahawks are also a very similar speed, only traveling at around 450 miles per hour. We can now see them shooting down another missile. And we can now see, I think this is over the Kyiv area, another caliber flying over, and of course being destroyed. And of course, while a large amount of these videos are old, I was thinking it would probably be worthwhile to show today because the successes of the Ukrainian air defense in this war are something that nobody in the world accounted for whatsoever. Nobody expected that the Ukrainian air defense would not only be able to contest the skies over Ukraine and then control them completely, not that far into the war, but they will also be able to shoot down Russian missiles. And now even today, we have heard that they've been able to shoot down at least 7 to 8 Iskander-Ms, which, according to the Russians before this war, were completely uncatchable, largely uncatchable missile. They couldn't be hit, and they were able to evade practically anything. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into our next clip of Location Unknown News, where we can see that the trees speak Russian. Oh, sukkably! And so we're going to see the Ukrainians making sure to take care of the Russians hiding under the trees. We can see right there a foot of a Russian sticking out of the tree for a second, and that lets us know that these trees are in fact speaking Russian. We now see the bomblet exploding under the tree, and we now see the Russians under there, and it appears that the trees will not be speaking Russian for much longer. Maybe the trees are speaking Ukrainian rather soon. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But really interesting to see that the Ukrainians were somehow able to find this almost half of a squad of Russians hiding around this tree, and also were able to land in a bomblet effectively on top of them. With that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip where we can see Ukrainian Shilka at work. We have not seen a Shilka in a while, and that has been for good reason. The Shilkas are a little old, but the Shilkas are still effective against the Shahed 136s. Here's a picture of a Shilka right here. These are a tracked, self-propelled anti-air gun with 4 23mm guns, all mounted to, I guess you could say, belts of 23mm ammo. It can fire for a pretty good long while in a continuous burst, and examples of this Shilka in Syria have been seen to be used in infantry support, and in a couple of rare instances we've even seen Ukrainian Shilkas also being used for infantry support as well. In this clip, we're just going to be watching it in operation, most likely shooting down Shaheds. We now see the turret rotating. We can see that this may be a video from the commander's position. And we can see this very confident guy here as the turret continues to move. And we can see them elevating the guns. And that's the end of the clip. And very interesting to see another one of these Ukrainian Shilkas at work. While one of Ukraine's older anti-air systems, and certainly not one of its most advanced, it is very important, much like the Gepards are, in making sure that they can shoot down Shahed 136s. It is probably the most economical way, rather than the Gepard, to deal with Shahed 136 drones, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians did not completely retire these before the war. Really, before the war, they didn't have an option. Of course, now, after the war, they probably will have an option of retiring these, but they'll probably decide not to, considering their experience and knowledge of how drone warfare, I guess you could say, evolves, and why the Shilka will be needed in future wars. And so this war is pretty much proving that older systems like the Shilka will probably have a continued long life in service of all countries around the world, and especially including Ukraine. We're now going to be moving on into our next clip. And I gotta tell you, just letting you know in advance, this is Russian propaganda. This is a fake video. And this has got to be the weirdest and craziest propaganda video I've ever seen. It is a propaganda video of a supposed Ukrainian soldier entering a dark, deep, secret lair somewhere for no reason, and walking past a guard and seeing German surgeons, actually, I'll hear that, harvesting the organs of a dead Ukrainian soldier, or a live one, or something. It is one of the weirdest propaganda videos I've ever seen, and I had to show it to y'all because it's just bizarre. And so with that, here's the clip. You see the Ukrainian soldier walking by. I like how this guy is supposed to be a guard and he's just hanging out on his phone.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, that's a little suspicious. And so really quickly to clarify why this is important, this guy is clearly a Russian. You can tell by the accent. And he's trying to speak in German and saying "raus," which means out in German. And so he's acting like they're trying to make it look like there's German surgeons in Ukraine that are harvesting organs. Like this dude, This is like a cheap looking movie set too. Like, what the hell is this?
And like, what's he telling him to do? Get out or something?
Yeah, he's telling him to get out. Like, you know, he's not supposed to be seeing the stuff. And it's like, if so, how the hell would he have made it back there that far? And why in the world would he be filming like he's trying to capture evidence? And on top of that, they couldn't set this set up even better if they wanted to. They even have that stupid little red and white cooler over there that you see in the movies, that they put like the kidneys in and stuff that everyone uses for the pranks. They have one over there.
This is like that scene from Squid Game.
It kind of is. Yeah, it kind of is. So now this guy, look at this. They get in a little confrontation, and he gives him this half-ass push. I love the half-ass push. It just lets you know it's fake, because that doesn't even have any spirit behind it. That was just a light push, and this guy reacts to it way too much. Way too much. Like, it's like he got, like, shoved by Mike Tyson or something like that. Now he's walking back out of, like, the plastic veil thing. And of course, they cut the video before he gets out of the plastic veil thing. But still, pretty wild to see. I think we've seen it all at that point. I've never seen anyone in propaganda circles, even in Russia up till this point, trying to make it look like there are Germans in Ukraine that are harvesting organs. Like, that is just bizarre. That truly is one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. And I had to show that to y'all, because I have to let y'all know what the Russians are saying, because crap like that is just insane. And so with that, we're moving on to our next clip, where we can also see that the Ukrainians have designed a new ATV for themselves to use. This thing has tires on it, like it's supposed to be in Arctic conditions, but it is pretty cool nonetheless. And so here's the clip. We can see them unveiling the new ATV, and we can see it right here. Thing's huge. And the wheels on this thing couldn't be any larger. I think these are the kind of wheels they use on those massive dump trucks that they use in the mines.
Hey, wait, is that a Sherp?
I don't think so. Is it a Sherp?
It looks like like a Sherp with its top cut off.
It is a Sherp. It's a Sherp.
Yeah, that's a Sherp. It's floating in the water, so it's definitely one. When did they get these?
I don't know. I really don't know, because wait a minute, hang on. I'm trying to rack my brain here. I think it was all the way back in like May of last year that a Sherp was shown on video, and it was said that they were eventually going to get them. It took them a whole year, but they finally have Sherps.
I think they're actually made in Ukraine now that somebody mentioned it in the live chat, so that might explain why they're out there.
Pretty interesting to see. Pretty neat to see these things in use as well, in a very unique vehicle. And now that everyone's talking about them being Sherps, I remember us looking at these a year ago, and we were really taken away with how cool and impressive these things were, especially considering that they're made in Ukraine and they're a domestic design. Of course, the large wheels give it the ability to float. And before that, I didn't really understand why it had the massive wheels. But now that everything's coming back to me, it's all coming back to me, Matthew. Now I understand why. I don't know what's up with
I'd rather have one of these over a Bobcat.
I'm not going to lie, that would be pretty cool to have one of these things. Now, the question is, how much does a Sherp cost? How much does a Sherp cost? Nope, not way. We want to know how much it costs. $115,000. Dang!
That's not bad. And I'm sure that Ukraine probably gets the special price.
Well, I'm not going to lie, though. That is pretty expensive.
That's not too bad.
Well, I mean, it's not as bad as it could get. I mean, you know, but like a BMP-1 is at least, I think, $300,000 at some of its cheapest points. But, I mean, like, dang, that thing is still a little pricey. But, and it also has a massive profile, too. That thing's tall. It's like maybe, I would say 8-9 feet tall, which is huge for anything on the battlefield. So it's got a bit of a high
and they
profile.
have a trailer behind it, too. It looks like you can haul.
Oh, dang, look at that. You can just take
cool.
everyone on a tour.
Oh, look at that white one over there to the left of the picture you're on.
No. Now that one is
that's
cool.
sick. That is sick.
Okay, I'm gonna admit, using that thing in the Arctic would be cool. I'm not gonna lie. That would be an incredibly cool thing to have in the Arctic, you know, like at a South Pole exploration like station or something like that. That would be something I would expect to see there. And I'm sure the Ukrainians have uses for these things. Probably swampy conditions are what they're looking for. And so we may see this thing operating in the area of the Dnipro River, or at least the limited number that they may have. But a really interesting vehicle, a really cool one, and of course, really neat to see. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on into the casualty report of the Russian forces over the past 24 hours. And of course, the casualty report is
we
not
got
getting
two.
better. We got two of them. And Matt said, and another one, DJ Khaled voice. And so, Matthew,
Another one.
Another one.
We the best.
We the best, DJ Khaled. And I got to say, really nice to see. And also, let's see who else is talking about the Bobcats. Keith Dusley's,
Hey.
2 for Matt. Hey. We got Jessica, 2 for Matt. Let's see
Toasty,
here.
Bobcat, rare, and juicy.
Hey, Ziggy, he's got a little high, wait a minute, an M240 lined up at a Bobcat. Pretty cool, pretty neat.
Very cool.
And
That's
so,
a nice model, by the way.
and yeah, really nice models, by the way. Matthew's, of course, a huge fan of nice models. But I actually sounded wrong. But anyways, we could see that 2 Bobcat skid steers, or special equipment vehicles, were destroyed over the past 24 hours. Not only that, but 460 Russian troops have also been taken out over the past 24 hours. And just to clarify, just in case if anyone's wondering, what is the actual breakdown on those numbers? Are they killed and wounded? Are they killed alone? They are killed alone, at least from what we understand. MinusRoost.com also reports these as the killed only, and it then adds on I believe it's an equation where they just multiply the kills times 2, and that gets them their wounded. They also add that onto the daily Russian casualty report as well. So that's 460 Russian soldiers taken out in a single day. A fairly lower number, especially compared to those months of January, February, and December, where Russian losses were reaching well above 700, and all the way up to some unbelievable numbers like 1,100 per day. This is not low, however, I will say that. It is right on the war's average, and compared to British and American losses during the Second World War on a day-to-day basis, this is actually on par with what the U.S. Army or the British Army, or really their entire armed forces, would be losing on average per day throughout the entirety of the Second World War. Just to give perspective to how high those losses really are. The U.S. was having these kinds of losses in the deadliest war known to man. We also saw that only 3 armored personnel carriers were destroyed. That is a little bit below the war's average of around 12 armored personnel carriers destroyed. We also saw that 13 supply trucks were destroyed as well. Actually, that is right on the war's average, and great to see that probably around 110 tons of supplies were destroyed on the backs of these supply trucks, and will not be making it to the battalion tactical groups to supply them and help them to keep going, of course improving Ukraine's frontline situation. We also saw that an additional 1 tank was lost, bringing that number up to 3,796. This is one of the lower numbers that we've seen even recently, and it is below the war's average of around 5 tanks being lost per day. However, Ukrainian counter battery has been on point for the past few weeks and has been able to destroy 25 artillery systems within the past 24 hours, which is quite an impressive number. We also saw that they were able to destroy 3 drones and 1 aircraft as well, which may have been that Su-25 that was, I guess you could say, seen in the Rostov-on-Don area that appeared to have taken significant damage. Or they may have been counting in this casualty report the Su-25 that was shot down over Melitopol yesterday, that we have confirmation of it crashing and then burning near the town of Melitopol. Still, the losses are not that bad. Not the highest numbers we've seen over the war, but still showing that the Ukrainians are grinding Russian forces down, and the Russian forces will be having a more difficult time continuing on the war with the loss of vehicles and forces. We're now going to be moving on from those location unknowns and on into our frontline news itself, starting in the northeast and then moving our way all the way down to Kvilipo. But before we get on into the news, we have to address some of our polls, because a lot of y'all have been saying some interesting stuff in those polls, and I want to hear what y'all have been saying. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, let's jump right into our first poll, which says Ukraine claims Russia plans to leak radioactive material from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and what are your thoughts? 41% said not good, it must be credible. 13% said unsure. 37% said, that's wild, but let's wait and see. And 8% said it sounds unbelievable to me. And I'm sure this probably caught a few people off guard. It certainly caught me off guard earlier when I posted it on Twitter. It seems that Russia, according to Ukrainian intel, which I'm not really sure exactly how confident they are in the intel, they said possibly in the coming hours there could be a false flag at the power plant where they try to leak some kind of radioactive material to claim there's been a disaster there. And I'm not sure exactly what their ultimate goal is with that. But I'll be honest. I'm going to say let's wait and see. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that there is a chance that the Russians could do something, but I also want to remind everyone that we've heard this many times before over the course of the war. Not to disagree with anyone out there, but every single time it's been said that the nuclear power plant is about to have a disaster or is about to be blown up, either by the Russians or the Ukrainians, regardless of who's saying it, it's never happened. And there is a good reason to believe that that probably would not happen, because there may be severe implications to a nuclear meltdown like that. For example, of course, this is a little bit of a stretch, but the United States may get directly involved in the war in Ukraine if that was to happen, although we're not entirely sure if that would be the exact outcome. Some of the kind of nuclear disasters that the Russians could possibly manufacture out of the power plant without sending it into a meltdown is leaking tritium into the water supply and then releasing that into the Dnipro, I guess you could say, reservoir that is north of Novokakhovka, which is where this nuclear reactor is. That has actually happened here in Alabama before with one of our nuclear power plants, which was the Browns Ferry nuclear power plant up here in the Tennessee Valley area, right on the Tennessee River. This power plant actually leaked hundreds of gallons of tritium irradiated water into the Tennessee River, although it was claimed that it didn't cause or pose any harm to the local populace. Although I have a little bit of my doubts about that, because I don't think radioactive material in the water, even if it's a very low amount per volume of water, is good for anyone. But that is something that...
I have a feeling the conversation kind of went like this. It won't hurt them. Let it go down the river.
Man, I know what it was like. Mine, I ain't gonna hurt them. They've drank worse. They drank Jack Daniels. Send it. That's probably how it went down. But once again, that's something that the Russians could possibly do. And I'd also like to bring y'all to another power plant, which is Fukushima Daiichi, which is on the coast of Japan. Since the nuclear reactors had the meltdown in, I believe it was, 2012, Matthew, during the Fukushima Daiichi disaster?
Somewhere around there.
After that disaster, the Japanese government has actually been leaking tritium from the reactors into the sea nearby in a fairly sizable amount. They had two options, and this is the reason why they did it. It's either they have to store it on facility sites around the reactor, which they actually did try to do for a little bit, but they figured out that that would be untenable because the amount of storage space that they would need to try and keep this irradiated water would become far too large. And so then they started to decide to dump thousands of gallons a month of tritium irradiated water into the seas nearby. And this has actually caused a pretty big diplomatic row in between a lot of the countries that have Pacific shorelines, like, for example, the United States, which even brought it up all the way from the other side of the Pacific, saying that that would probably pose health hazards to the people in the area and may even affect the local fish populations. Some of y'all may or may not know this, but fishing rights and the, I guess you could say, altering of fish populations, or the altering of populations of sea life at all, is actually a major deal for many countries around the world. Some countries almost even go to blows or outright war over the fate of fishing rights and also the altering of populations of fish. So this actually was a little bit of a big deal with the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, and this is something we could probably see happening at the Zaporizhzhia power plant in Ukraine. I honestly think that is the most likely scenario if there was to be any kind of a nuclear incident at the power plant at this moment. It wouldn't be severe enough that foreign countries would directly involve themselves, like we would probably see in the event of a complete meltdown at the power plant. But at the same time, it will be affecting the Ukrainians. Ukraine does gather a decent amount of drinking water, even up until this point, from the Dnipro reservoirs, especially for a town like Nikopol, which I believe, if I remember correctly, actually draws its water supply from the Dnipro River itself, treats it, and then it's, of course, sent through the tap. If there was tritium irradiating this water in large amounts, that means that that may start to affect the drinking supply of water for the local populace that's on the Ukrainian side, and that could start to pose massive issues, as the Ukrainians would have to divert effort and resources to making sure that these people have clean drinking water of any kind. So that may be the kind of nuclear disaster we would see at the Zaporizhzhia power plant, if likely going off of other examples of what kind of nuclear disasters and incidents there can be. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. I still think that the chances of it happening are a little low, but it's still a possibility, and if it is going to happen, I think that's most likely the way it will happen. Once again, take that with a grain of salt. We are not experts on anything or everything, and I have a belief that you don't have to be an expert or have to have done something to be able to talk on the subject. Otherwise, what the hell can people talk about? You're a cashier at Publix, and you sit there and talk about how to rack up change or something like that. I don't know. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, despite leading the coalition for F-16s, the Netherlands is undecided on sending jets to Ukraine, and what are your thoughts? 46% said it's usual politics and no worries, 30% said, why are they hesitant, 10% said unsure, and 14% said the coalition is a joke. And if y'all remember a while back, I did say about this coalition that it's likely some more stalling tactics. While it seems like it was looking promising for a moment, it seems like if the leader of it is not decided on whether or not they want to send jets, and the whole purpose of the coalition is to get the jets sent, it seems kind of like a joke to me. Maybe there's some kind of reason that I'm not aware of that they're held up on it that's kind of minor, but it sounds a little silly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the fact that the coalition is once again running into problems is not a good thing whatsoever. It doesn't really matter, at least at the moment, that the Dutch are completely on board with the idea of sending F-16s. It really more so matters, as far as the current members of the coalition or supporters of this plan, that the Polish be the ones to really spearhead this entire operation, because they do have the number of F-16s needed and the kind needed that Ukraine would most likely receive and be very happy about. The Dutch aircraft are not that numerous. I believe there's only about 12 F-16s in the Royal Netherlands Air Force, and on top of that, they are some of the oldest versions of F-16s flying. I believe they are all F-16As, which was one of the first F-16 variants introduced in the service worldwide. So it may not really matter that they get Dutch F-16s, at least at the moment, so they can kind of be hung up for a little while, and it's not really going to be changing much of anything. But as far as the Polish are concerned, they're the ones that really must be pushed forward to make sure that those F-16s do make it to Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, can you reread that poll again real quick just to make sure I answered that correctly?
It says, despite leading the coalition for F-16s, the Netherlands is undecided on sending jets to Ukraine.
Okay, so I had to make sure I addressed that correctly because I saw someone say the bill passed, and I was like, wait a minute. Is this a thing in Congress? So I'd be like, hold up. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Pretty interesting to hear what y'all are thinking. And that's what I weigh in on it as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, the EU warns against Russia's extremely dangerous move to deploy nukes to Belarus. And what are your thoughts? It looks like 52% said it is a very dangerous move. I agree. 15% said it's not extremely dangerous. 13% said it's just political talk from the EU. And it looks like 20% said both option 1 and 4. And I would fall within the 20%. I think personally to me, it is not extremely dangerous. And also it's probably just political talk from the EU to counter Russia's political talk. It really doesn't change anything by putting nukes in Belarus rather than sending a symbolic message to the West. Nothing in reality is actually changed. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, reread the line.
The EU warns against Russia's extremely dangerous move to deploy nukes to Belarus.
I would say it's not going to be that much of a concern, at least from a strategic perspective. But I would have to say I would caution the Russians against that because, of course, while it's not dangerous strategically, at the same time, why would we want the nukes to move to Belarus without making too much of a protest about it? It's really letting the Russians do what they want without trying to force their hand to back off the situation. So while it isn't dangerous from a strategic perspective, because, of course, these nukes, as far as range goes, could practically reach the same targets from mainland Russia as they will be able to from Belarus as well if they're the shorter range nuclear weapons. So it doesn't really make that much of a difference in that sense. But at the same time, I don't think we should just allow the Russians to freely move those weapons into Belarus, and we should start to make a stink about that. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And very interesting poll, by the way, and very interesting results as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and of course, that was our last poll for now, so we are moving on to our Super Chat questions. And our very first one is going to go to Thomas Marsh, who puts in a $100 donation. And thank you very much, Thomas, for that very generous support. He says, go Enforcer, and we love what you do.
Thank you so much for the support, Thomas March, and long live the LSA, and thank you for enjoying what we do. We try our best to make sure that this news comes out each and every night. Well, actually, we have rarely ever failed on that. We've only missed 2 days over the course of this entire channel's run history of missing a stream. One was because the internet just died, so we couldn't physically run a stream that day. And the other one day, which I still look at with great dishonor, is that I was just burned out completely, and so I ended up canceling one day stream. Beyond that, I have to say, this stream has a great running record of being able to run 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and that honestly, more so than anything, is probably the thing I'm most proud about with this channel is the regularity at which we've been able to keep this stream running and keep news coming out. And I got to thank you so much once again, Thomas Marsh, for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this channel possible. We don't get supported any other way than through the live chat, and we always want to make sure to recognize each and every individual that makes this channel possible and helps to support us behind the scenes, so that way we can keep this thing running. And thank you so much once again, Thomas Marsh, for enjoying what we do, and we're going to make sure to keep this thing rolling until the end. And I'd also like to reiterate this. Last night, we were age restricted for a short while, and that was a very odd circumstance. That's rarely ever happened, especially during a live stream. And also, in case if y'all do not know, that actually bars us from receiving super chats if a stream is age restricted, especially when it's live, because if it's live, that's the time people send in super chats. That's the only time they can be received. So if a stream is age restricted, we cannot receive super chats at all. And I want to make this clear. Regardless whether we receive support daily or not, whether the stream is age-restricted daily or not, this stream and its news will continue to run until this war ends. We will find a way to keep this thing running. We will never stop running this channel until this war is over. I started this war supporting Ukraine, and I started this war with the belief that regardless of how small the effort is from this channel in the end, I would keep on doing this until the war was done. And hopefully by then, the efforts, the small amount that we've been able to make, because while it seems massive that the Lee Spring Army has nearly raised $1 million, it wasn't that long ago that the United States sent another $3 billion to Ukraine. So in the big picture of things, it's small, but it really, honestly, for the Lee Spring Army itself, this is monumentous. And I would say that as long as we are able to keep this stream running, as long as we're able to keep covering the news on what's happening in Ukraine, and to continue to tell the stories of all these brave people over there who continue to fight and die for their country, and the people who have traveled from around the world to defend the nation of Ukraine and the Western world as a whole, we will keep on running this stream until the end, regardless whether we are able to receive super chats or not due to an age restriction. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, Thomas Marsh. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and being a old guard of the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I got to say on a side note, I'm also very proud of what has been created here as well. And also, whenever we do eventually skip a stream, like the few times we have, it feels extremely weird because I've become so accustomed, me and Enforcer have, of showing up here every single night. When we're not here, it feels like something is really out of whack. And I see a lot of you saying that as well also. So it's good to know that we're all deeply obsessed with showing up on YouTube at 10 p.m. Eastern every night.
I'm telling you, it's like an obsession, honestly, because I'll tell you all this. It feels really bizarre whenever Monday comes around. Like, honestly, Matthew and me are kind of like NPCs at that point. Like, when the stream should be running, we're just standing, staring at a blank wall somewhere, and then when someone walks by, we turn around and go, hello, it is streaming time. And then we just turn around and start staring back at the wall. Like, Mondays are really weird. It is good, though, to make sure that we unwind and have a little bit of a breather to do another 6 days of streaming. But really, if it wasn't, because I remember the first month of the war, because I know that it's a mistake to do non-stop streaming 7 days a week every single day. If it wasn't for me going through the experiences of the first month and just being burned out after 30 straight days of doing it without end, I would have kept on. I probably would have reverted it from a 6-day schedule to a 7-day schedule, and then realized how bad of a mistake that was, pacing-wise. But still, with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to none other than Mark, General of the LSA, who puts in a very generous $95 super chat. And thank you, Mark, very much for that support. As always, he says, pop quiz, what is the New Zealand native Maori dance to honor your enemies called? All Kiwis and Aussies need to shut up. Damn.
Dang, brutal. Mark, General of the LSA, is a brutal general. I need 50 nukes to nuke the Yalu River. What the hell, MacArthur? But anyways, thank you so much for the support, Mark. And to answer that question, and it is the Haka. I actually know that one because I've seen a couple of Hakas on YouTube. I've never seen them in real life. They are pretty neat. And then Gordon said a Haka. Dang it, Gordon, you weren't supposed to answer that. But he's got a Canadian flag, so I guess he gets a pass. But still, it is the Haka. The Haka is actually a dance that was made by the Maori people who originally lived in the lands of New Zealand before it was colonized by the British, I believe in the late 1700s and early 1800s in large. But still, it is a very interesting dance, and nowadays in New Zealand, it has started to make a return. It's supposed to be... and I'm not really sure about this, Mark. I believe you actually said it in the super chat. It's either to intimidate the enemy or to show them a sign of respect, one or the other. What was it, Matthew, in the super chat?
Let's see here. It was the dance to honor your enemies.
So it is to honor the enemies. And it's a very interesting, and also the Maori people are very interesting because they have a large amount of face tattoos, and they're very interesting ones. And you can actually see them in pop culture a couple of times. For example, Mike Tyson, I believe, actually has some kind of a Maori face tattoo. And many of y'all may know what that one looks like, but he has some kind of a face tattoo. It's right over his right eye. And you don't
I didn't know what that... I didn't know that's what that was.
You don't know the kind of pain he suffered to get that tattoo. Oh man,
bet.
it's terrible. I'd to take your kids and bust them open with a hammer and let you know the pain that I felt getting that tattoo.
And then also, Chakotay, if y'all are Star Trek fans, Chakotay from Star Trek Voyager also had some kind of a Maori face tattoo as well, which is very interesting that it's shown up several times in pop culture. And just really neat all around that they actually get some representation out there, I guess you could say, in the world, because a decent amount of other cultures, like the Maori culture, don't really get a lot of, I guess you could say, representation out there. And it's always interesting to see the cultures and customs of folks like the Maori, because they're really making a comeback in New Zealand for sure. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. And also, another thing I'd have to say is that me being... well, Matthew and me actually being largely of Welsh descent, coming from, the country of Wales, Cymru yn Byth, I believe is how that's said. Let me know if I'm correct on that or not. But we are actually from Wales, and it's very neat to see that for the longest time, Wales was actually treated quite poorly as a culture by the English, and they've actually been making a return as well, largely ever since I was born in the early 2000s, and so Welsh language is starting to make a bounce back, and more people are starting to speak it, and their culture and their, I guess you could say, language and heritage are starting to come back to the forefront in Wales again. So it's really interesting to see that kind of stuff, and really cool to know that cultures like that can survive, because usually other cultures, the ones that kind of have dominion over the territory, kind of just slowly either crush that one just due to their weight, or they go out of their way to make sure that they can slowly fade away. And it's always neat to know that there is a decent amount of cultural, I guess you could say, differences out there, like there is in Wales, which is where our family comes from. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you once again for the support, Mark. And with that, we are on to the final one of this question segment. But before we do, I want to thank you so much once again as well, Mark, for being a general of the LSA. Not just an old guard of the LSA, but a general of the LSA. And I thank you so much once again for appreciating this channel enough to support us, because folks like you do make this possible to keep on running. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the final one of the segment, and then we'll be returning back into the news.
All right, and speaking of Mark, once again, he puts in another super chat, and this time it's a $60 donation. And thank you very much, Mark, once again for that second support of the night. He says, if you look at the artillery over the last 2 weeks or so, the number is consistently high, and this implies to me they are clearing the artillery.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I'd agree with that completely. I would say that they are certainly trying to clear out the artillery, because as many of y'all may know, it is the Russian artillery that has outnumbered Ukrainian artillery since pretty much the beginning of the war by massive numbers, almost by 7-1 in most instances. And so it appears that the Ukrainians are taking a conceded effort to destroy Russian artillery as much as they possibly can, because the more Russian artillery that's destroyed, the more level the playing field is, the less artillery the Russians can levy on the field if they even have the ammunition for it, which means that the Ukrainians will have the upper hand advantage. For example, in fights in between infantry units, and let's just lay out a hypothetical one. Let's say they're fighting for the village of Alsivka, and the Russians are holding a defensive position here in this part of the village, and the Ukrainians are advancing from what appears to be this ditch area and forward onto them. Now, if the Russians are emphasizing some kind of communications with the artillery, which sometimes we don't see, this Ukrainian force moving forward will engage the Russians. The Ukrainians will start to engage those Russian forces holding those houses with pinpoint artillery strikes. But the Russians, of course, outnumbering the Ukrainian artillery massively, don't really need to conserve their shells. It will, at least in their minds, they actually kind of do, because they've run out of them, and they've been out of them almost for months. But at least in theory, they can call in artillery on those Ukrainians and levy a larger volume of firepower against those advancing Ukrainians than the Russians will be receiving from them. So that means the Ukrainian infantry force will end up becoming suppressed and pretty much just have to lay low and wait out the artillery barrage. And the Russians, while still being hit by artillery, possibly, they will be allowed a little bit more freedom of movement because the barrage will not be so overwhelming to them. You always have to remember as well is that while Russian artillery is hardly as accurate as Ukrainian artillery, from what we can tell, it is far less accurate, probably 25% as accurate as Ukrainian artillery. When fired in volume, the shaking of pretty much the world around you, and also the concussive blast of these shells, according to accounts from veterans of the First and Second World War, is enough to make a soldier fall to the ground and pretty much just cover their head and push their hands onto their face and then into the dirt as hard as they can and just wait until the barrage is over. Every single soldier that has ever recounted their stories of being under barrage says that it is the most terrifying thing on earth. It is truly nerve-ending. It almost makes it feel like your nerves will snap. And you always have to remember that is something very tough that the Ukrainians have a challenge of dealing with, although they deal with it with great grace and with great stride. And that is probably why we're seeing that the Ukrainians are making an effort to pretty much clear out the artillery throughout all of the Russian armed forces, so that way they don't really have to deal with situations like that going forward. And it will certainly help them, considering that their forces will probably not be suppressed as much as they were before, when the Russians had a large amount of artillery. That'll certainly help them with counteroffensives going forward. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. Once again, Mark, in helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you, once again, help to make this thing possible. You help the lights to keep on above our heads. Really just paying rent. The lights would stay on anyways, it's just that we wouldn't be in this room. So, yeah, you're helping us to stay in this room. You're helping us to keep this channel running and helping us to continue on doing what we do. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Mark, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're now going to be moving on into the northeastern area and the past 24 hours there. We have not seen any sizable, I guess you could say, firefights or actions happening in this area. Of course, business as usual as far as the northeastern front is concerned, although we did see in video footage the Battle of Kreminna has heated up at least a small amount, and we are seeing that infantry are beginning to engage each other on the field again. And so moving on into our first clip into the area of Kuzmivka, we saw an Uragan firing at the Russian forces. When you see that Uragan set up in the field, a very rare sight. The Ukrainians don't use Uragans that much. And yo, this guy is whipping out the fit. This is the fit bit, man. Look at those flip-flops. The absolute gall of this man.
This dude is casual fighting a war.
If the Russians capture this man, they are going to be in absolute admiration of his footwear. The flip-flop is...
If you see a guy roll up in flip-flops in a war, you better turn around and go the other direction.
Dude, imagine dying to a guy in flip-flops. That's how what's it do. You're the Russian that's on the ground sitting there going, what the hell, man? And he's just going, hey, man, it was my day off. And then he just keeps on going. But, man, that's pretty wild to see.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'd probably be in flip-flops too if I was in the war for a long time.
Honestly, it looks comfortable. I'm not gonna lie. When you see the artillerists out there still adjusting the MLRS and fire, and
damn,
holy
son.
moly, it just fired. We can tell that it fired right there. Jeez, that thing was like a bomb going off.
That guy's ears are bleeding.
What was that?
Put those Crocs in sport mode, baby.
Dude, he's gonna whip that little top thing backwards and put it on his heel. He's gone, man. But with that, that's the end of the clip. But I gotta say, man, you never realize how powerful the backblast is on those rockets until they aim it pretty much downward at the field, and you see the kind of pillar of dirt it flings up. That was like a 250-pound bomb going off right there. Like, jeez. Dude, imagine the backblast of one of those things if you were standing behind it. Good God, you would be dead instantly. But with that, that's the end of that clip. Still pretty interesting to see that the Ukrainians were using one of their Uragans in the area. Honestly, I'm just completely blown away by the size of the backblast. And with that, we're now going to be moving on down into the Kreminna area. We have seen that Russian forces once again have continued to hold this bulge, which is largely comprised of Russian defensive positions that exist within these tree lines that you can visibly see here on the map. It appears that Ukrainian and Russian forces are fighting for the control of these very thin tree lines, and the Ukrainians are attempting to once again push the Russians out of those tree lines and further back and into the area of Dnipro, which we can see right here. We now see the Ukrainian forces moving through the tree line in this area and continuing to advance forward through it. We can now see them firing a small infantry mortar. It appears to be a 40mm. And we can now see a drone looking where the mortar is most likely being fired and showing us the impacts right over there. And those things are tiny. They're 40mm, so they're not like massive charges or anything like that, like an 81mm. But still great to see that the Ukrainian infantry are able to use their own infantry mortars against the Russians, and from what we could tell, with some relatively good accuracy. Although, unfortunately, we couldn't see the Russian forces, so we can't really account for the kind of damages that they took. But with that, we're now going to be moving on down into the area of Verkno-Kamyanka, Zolotarivka, and Bila-Urivka, where we saw a Russian unit claiming that they have nothing. And these people are spoiled, because for them to think they'd ever get anything in the Russian army is a little bit of a stretch. But here's the video. We have a request from the mobilized military personnel who were sent from Berdiansk on 14/05/2023. In view of the non-disclosure military secrets, we appeal to the Commander-in-Chief of the Russian Federation. The riot that is taking place in the LPR at the arrival point is in disregard of the positions and ranks. The uniforms are changed, the uniforms are given out in disregard of security requirements. The body armor has severe damage and traces of the former use. The maximum wear, the lack of Kevlar armor. The weapons are restored and remade. There are a lot of weapons with traces of blows and curvatures of the barrels. Initially sent to the reserve, the ammunition is distributed. The things are forced to be left. Take with you underpants, socks, and 2 liters of water. Military tickets are not issued, in which the weapons and the staff of the commanded are marked. There is no documentary confirmation. And let me go back and get that one again. That one passed by. Documentary confirmation of the staff. We do not refuse to carry out the combat mission, but in fact, we do not. We ask you to react and adjust the situation as soon as possible. And we are awaiting for the next terms. So we can see right here that this little Russian unit is complaining that everything they've gotten is absolute garbage. In fact, everything they're getting has come off of the guy that came before them that may be pushing up sunflowers in the fields of Ukraine, because they stated that the body armor was clearly used, meaning that it had been shot. They also said there was clear dents and like bent barrels on their AKs. So just think of like the Looney Tunes guns, you know, like when they shoved them in a wall and they would like do a whole U-turn and then point back at their face. That's the kind of AKs they're getting, according to them. Nothing they're getting is of quality. Well, anything they're getting isn't even new. It's all just coming off of the next guy that came before him, and it appears that they're not too happy about that. I don't think anyone would be happy with that, but these guys appear to be making a little bit of a stink out of it. And I also have to say, I love how this looks like a military museum of the Russian army, showing the evolution of their combat uniform over the past 40 years. Like, you got this guy looking like he just came out of Afghanistan in the 80s, and then this guy right here who's wearing a Gorka 5 from, like, the mid-2010s. Like, they've got...
Wait a minute. I got to point something out real quick. The 2 guys on the end, that guy second from the right, he looks like he has to pee.
Dude, he does. He looks like he has to pee.
And the guy on the right side of him looks like, dude, are you okay?
Dude, Dude, this guy is looking down like, bro, do you have a problem with something? Like, he's like, are you okay, man? Let's see, who else? This guy is looking down with his hood on. Dude, he's sitting there thinking, he's sitting there saying, people need to fear me. They need to fear the beast inside. And then we can see this guy over here who looks like he literally just did come out of Afghanistan in like 1986.
Yeah.
And then you got this guy here. He looks like, dude, honestly, like that is like, that would be, I don't know, like the like designer clothes you would see on the red carpet, like during some kind of event in Hollywood, you know, the stuff that's got holes in it.
Yeah, somewhat.
and then this guy right here, I don't really know what to make of this guy. This guy looks like he's honestly out for a morning stroll. But yeah,
It looks like maybe he doesn't want to be there.
dude, he's sitting there like one of those kids at the playground at school that's like, I want my mom. He's like standing like that. I want my mom to pick me up. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip. We can see the Motley crew here that's getting nothing good. And this appears to be the only guy. Well, actually, PP Man and Afghan Man, they're the only ones in the video that appear to have AKs. Everyone else is pretty much left with nothing, at least in the video. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip of news and on down into the area of Bakhmut, where we have started to get a little bit more news than normal, at least compared to the past few days. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces, according to Deep State UA, were able to advance a small amount further into the fields outside of Bakhmut, although it appears to be a very minor move. It seems as though they may have been only able to move up around 30 yards, at least according to Deep State UA. However, beyond that, we did see video footage that may have not been accounted for on Deep State UA's map in this area, showing that the 3rd Brigade, also known as the Azov, was able to push forward across the canal zone and clear Russian trenches, now taking control of the complete area of the northern canal zone. This is large news, and we'll be getting to that a little bit later, but we'll be starting off here in the northeast, because while there's big news down in the south, there is even large news in the north as well. And so starting off near Rostov-on-Don, we saw a Ukrainian drone destroy an SPG-9. Bro, talk about that trap. Dude, man.
That's deep, dark trap.
Dude, call this video Russian because it's supposedly laying a trap. Like everyone's been saying so far in the war, is he trap? So anyways, so you see it dropping the grenade right near the SPG-9. It explodes. And the real question is, does it get any ammo? It did explode right on the SPG-9. There may be some kind of damage to the barrel. We can now see them dropping another one, which actually tips the SPG-9 over, either destroying the tripod it's on and also causing heavy damage to the recoilless rifle as well. That one landed right on the barrel. There's no doubt about it. That one probably did take out the SPG-9 and render it unusable. We now see them dropping another grenade and exploding as well, taking out an SPG-9. Now, that's great and all. You know, a $25,000 SPG-9 taken out. Some Russian bot out there somewhere is going, is that the best you could show? Just an SPG-9? Get out of here. There's so much better to show. The Ukrainians are winning. But then they got a T-90M just like an hour later. So let's watch the pride of the Russian tank force getting blown up in the northern area as well. So here's the clip. Well, you can see the T-90M right there. And we can now see them giving information about the T-90M over here.
Creepy music to go with it.
Dang, man. Yeah, this is creepy. Oh, we getting a little beat. Stay drip to the flick night.
Oh, no.
We're going to mute that because that may be copyrighted, but we can see the T-90M sitting there. But what's interesting about it, though, is that notice what it looks like. It doesn't look like it's in a dugout for the tank in a hull-down position. It looks like it may have fallen into a crater because the barrel's kind of stunk into the ground. And it may have already been abandoned, which would be pretty wild. Of course, it's not the first time we've seen a T-90M abandoned, but these are the pride of the Russian tank force. This is the best tank the Russians can practically field, and yet it's just kind of sitting here, and there's nobody around, and it appears to have been abandoned in a crater. We can see the drone continuing to observe it, and we can now see what appears to be another drone flying up with an infrared camera. And Anglo-Saxon, I would agree with you. It does look like it's kind of parked defensively, but that barrel looks like it's been stuck into the ground, like it may have fallen forward and the barrel just slammed into the ground. So it may have been that it fell into the crater, they weren't able to recover it, and instead of getting a recovery vehicle, they just abandoned it here. That may be the case. It kind of looks like that to me, but, you know, it may also be in a defensive position. We'll just have to see if a crew bails out. We can see the drone lining up its bomblet right here. And we now see them dropping the first bomblet. This one appears to be going for the engine bay, and it did explode directly on top of the engine bay, most likely causing some significant damage to the engine itself. We can now see a second bomblet being dropped, which now lands right near the side of the turret, not really on the engine bay, but more so towards the crew compartment. They're now dropping a third bomblet, and as we know, the third time is the charm. We can also see an animal running away, and we can see that this one landed, and let's make sure to get that again. It looks like it landed right on top of the gun mantle, which is very rare to see. We usually don't see that, and I'm not sure if any kind of damage was actually caused from that hit. We can now see the fourth bomblet most likely being lined up to drop. We can now see another drone, it appears, flying in to try and continue on taking it out. We can now see the drone flying over and getting ready to drop some additional bomblets. We can now see them lining up the drone bomblet again. Oh, excuse me? Oh, hello there?
Oh, just targeting noises.
Oh, I was sitting there thinking it was supposed to be a phone call. I was going to be like, oh, hello? But we can see them lining up the bomblet and dropping it. This one appears to fall off the mark. It fell to the side of the tank near the treads. Dude, you know what?
Good show.
You know, you need those beeping sounds.
Oh, is that the heater?
Yeah, that's the heater. That's the space heater. I gotta tell you, man, it still gets me. This room has absolutely no ventilation whatsoever. I have to like manually control the heating and cooling with a giant fan and a space heater. But we can see them dropping another bomblet, and we can see it exploding right on the engine bay. This time we can see a large plume of what appears to be smoke coming out of the vents of the engine bay, showing that it has certainly breached the engine bay, and it's now causing real damage to the engine itself, most likely. And we can see that they say there's an ignition of the power unit back there, which may be one of the tank's batteries, if tanks have batteries. And we can now see another bomblet exploding directly on top of the turret. And we can see that this T-90M is a tough nut to crack. However, they have been able to destroy the engine bay for the large part, which usually means, at least from what we've seen in the war, the Russians will probably never use this tank again, and it may as well be destroyed as far as they are concerned, because their recovery vehicles or their recovery teams are practically non-existent. We can now see the nighttime footage showing the T-90M is on fire, and with that small little glint of a fire, we know that that tank will burn down throughout the night. With that, that's the end of the clip. But really good to see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a T-90M in the northern flank of Bakhmut, or the battlefield of Bakhmut. And once again, another $4.5 million main battle tank destroyed that the Russians will not be able to use. Those are also in very limited numbers. I believe the number we got is somewhere in between the ballpark of 50 or 80 of those examples exist in the entire Russian army. And we've seen around 20 or so of them destroyed at this point. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on a little bit behind the lines, where we saw a Cougar MRAP in service. And I gotta tell you, man, you better watch out.
What's that Cougar doing out there like that?
Man, I gotta tell you, you don't want to know what this thing's doing in Dubai, man. But still, it is a nice-looking MRAP. Honestly, this isn't the best Cougar I've seen so far. That actually sounded really bad, and that wasn't even supposed to be
strange.
a fun. But you can see right here, it is a Cougar MRAP. There's not really a lot I can say, because everything I'm going to say about this MRAP is going to sound wrong, but it's neat to see a Cougar out there near the lines. With that, we're going to be
I like how boxy it is. It looks pretty cool compared to a normal one.
I'm not gonna lie, I like the Cougars over the Max Pros. I think the Cougars look better. That sounds so bad. We're moving on to Berkivka, where we saw a massive explosion and ammo detonation occurring behind the lines in the Bakhmut area. I'm just going to give up on the whole MRAP thing. We're not going to bring up that name of that MRAP ever again. But here's the explosion. And ooh, Look at the glitter. Well, that's a
Oh
lot of glitter.
my.
Oh my. Wow. And we can see a massive ammo detonation occurring on the northern flank of Bakhmut. We assume that this is somewhere near the western ridgeline, one of the largest explosions that we've seen in the Battle of Bakhmut. Of course, we don't know exactly what was blown up. We don't know what kind of ammo it was. Could have been MLRS rockets, could have been artillery shells, could have been anything. We do know that it was ammo-based because the smoke is pure white, which is an ammo explosion. But beyond that, we just don't really know exactly what was in that explosion. Still, whatever it was a great shot by the Ukrainian artillerists that most likely hit this and were able to knock it on out. We can now see the drone gaining altitude to try and keep up with the mushroom cloud.
Also, who did the oh my thing, by the way? Was that George Bush?
That was George Takei. Oh my.
Okay.
You remember that?
Was that the guy from Star Trek?
Yeah, he was Mr. Sulu.
Oh, okay.
I like how in Star Trek, Matthew, beyond the original series, there was always Commander Riker. And then on the original series, it was just Mr. Sulu, like he's just some random dude. It's like, wait a minute, he doesn't get a rank like Lieutenant Sulu or Ensign Sulu or anything like that. He's just Mr. Sulu. Like he just shows up one day and goes, oh my. And they're like, get on that damn helm and fly this thing. But anyways, we're going to be moving on into the city of Bakhmut itself, where we have seen a video that came out before the Ukrainians were largely pushed out of the city, where we saw them firing a handheld rocket launcher at an enemy position. Unfortunately, I forgot the name of this rocket launcher, but you can see it.
Огонь! Огонь, да, туда!
Dude, this was so much confusion at the start of this clip. This guy ran out there, the cameraman said, fire! And then the guy turned around and said, what? And then the guy said, fire, dang it! And then he fired it, and it sounded like the whole world blew up.
Огонь! Огонь, да, туда! Есть, сука, следующий!
Now we can see the next guy going out.
Дед, прямо, да, вот так. Готов? Готов, давай, огонь!
Ooh, that one had a
Бросик
little flare.
пошел! Сразу за ним! Прямо вот так вот! Готов! Огонь! Командир! Вперед! Командир долбоебов! Командир долбоебов пошел! Готов! Огонь!
Next guy getting out there. He fired a little early. He didn't really step out there that far.
Все лучшие! Аплодисменты!
I like the guy talking. He's a character.
And so that's the end of the clip, but a little look at the Ukrainians before they withdrew from the city, and a look at the high spirits of the brave guys who continued to fight for that city until the very last block was taken. And even today, it does appear that there are still some Ukrainian forces that are in the area, at least around the town, as we saw the 93rd conducting a defense on the outskirts of the city. This marker was kind of put in the fields because we don't know where this was. This was taken from what we understand today, however, and it does show that the 93rd, the Fighting 93rd, the famous Fighting 93rd that's been known throughout the war for doing amazing stuff, and especially being involved in that Balaklia counteroffensive, being one of the units that spearheaded the first push to break the Russian lines, and we can see them still operating in the area of Bakhmut today here on this film.
Да сука!
We hear an artillery shell exploding in the distance.
Ебать, что такое? О.
Man, this car's got an exhaust on it.
Man, that thing be tuned.
Oops. Ебать, пизда.
We now see them moving the car forward as the artillery continues to land. And we can hear that while this soldier is stressed, he's still keeping a level head about the whole thing and making sure not to overreact.
Заряжение?
The car is now on the move. We can see the explosion of the shell down further on the road where they're driving. And I think, real quick, y'all can see why cars don't survive that long. And you can see that they're pretty much driving over what's practically dirt at this point. The road doesn't exist if there ever even was one. And they're flooring this thing at about 30 to 40 miles an hour. Of course, this is what they must do to make sure that they're able to survive and not become a Russian target. And this is also why you see that, I guess you could say, normal cars like you and me drive end up not really lasting that long on the front lines because they have to contend with conditions like these and rough driving like this, and that's why it's, of course, incredibly important to make sure to continue to get cars and vehicles to the Ukrainian armed forces, because just naturally they're going to be consuming a large amount of them just due to the normal wear and tear that they'll be enduring. Honestly, if a car company was smart, Matthew, they would set up auto dealerships near the front lines and do warranty work on these things, because I have a feeling that they could probably do a lot of warranty work, or any work for that matter, on all the cars that are used near the front.
Man, all they'd be saying is, we're going to deny that. It's not covered under the warranty.
Oh, they would. You know it. We're not even going to lie. You know it.
Де пацаны?
We now see a car right there that they're
Да я
passing.
даю-то, блядь.
And they're moving on. We now hear something else explode nearby. We couldn't see it, though, on film. And we now hear the rip of a machine gun as they drive by a Spartan.
Стреляй нахуй.
And we hear gunfire happening right around their vehicle. That may actually be the guy riding shotgun. And we now see them breaking through an allotment yard and out the other end as they continue to floor this thing and get the hell out of there. And we can see that the passenger in the side is continuing to fire off his rifle at the Russians. It's an actual drive-by shooting. And we can see them making their way to another spot in the city of Bakhmut.
Да, куда-то туда.
Man, these guys have got balls. Like, they're firing at everything leaving. They must be deep into Russian lines. You're seeing them continuing to race forward down this poor conditioned road. I mean, you see what appears to be a fire up here, which appears to be maybe artillery that had just exploded and caught the area on fire.
Ебать, проскочил. Тихо.
So considering, Matty, that the passenger has an AK, is he driving shotgun or is he driving AK?
That's a good question. But like Mark said, though, the steering wheel's on the right hand of the car. So, what does that mean?
It's British, governor. That's what it means. It's from Britain. And, you know, that's something that was throwing me off a little bit because I was thinking of the guy riding shotgun. I was like, he's on the wrong side of the car. But then I remember this is actually the right side of the car if you're from Britain. You know, being in the right's relative. But with that.
And someone pointed out there is a bullet hole on the side of the car in the mirror you can see on the right.
And that was not there earlier, actually. So that means that that bullet just whizzed right by the driver and right through the mirror.
Дай, братан.
Right.
I didn't even see that happen, actually.
Thank you, Cole Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Cole Jack, for pointing that out. I didn't even see it. Oh, you see them racing through the rest of the town, making their way on out. And we hear what it sounds to be bullets that were fired at them.
Автомат мешает,
And we can see that they're picking up the speed.
Скиньте назад.
Maybe going about 80 miles an hour down this one-way road. We can hear them locking up the brakes there for a second as they skidded, and we now see them taking a hard left turn.
Да поехали, блядь.
You now hear them flooring it again.
Блядь, братан. Я.
You now see them taking a right turn. And making it on out of there still. These guys are not going to stop until they're the hell out of there, and they're doing a damn good job at it.
Ставлю его нахуй.
Now they're on the way out. It seems that they've made it out of the danger zone and they're now in safety as they drive down the highway, the paved road, the only paved road we've seen in the video, and on out of there. These guys were very lucky. They had a lot of close calls during that video, but yet they were able to keep their cool and make sure that they were able to make it on out, which is impressive on their end, and once again showing the kind of courage and fearlessness that Ukrainian soldiers have while they're conducting these operations around the city of Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving...
Weird. It's weird just to see them drive basically a normal car into like the middle of a fight like that.
And it is kind of crazy. But what's really crazy is that this is a normal sight over there, you know, just to see a car that's been requisitioned by the army, and either the Russians or the Ukrainians are using it. And I've got to give a lot of credit to the Ukrainian soldiers that just drive these normal cars, because they don't have the luxury that the guys in the MRAPs do, where they know if an RPG hits that thing, they'll be fine. If these guys get hit with really anything, they're done for. And so they've got to be quick, and they have to be really nimble in these things. And these guys pulled that off exceptionally well. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip from the Fighting 93rd and into our next one from the city of Bakhmut, where we got a view of the city today. And it was a very interesting view, actually. We got to see that there was a Chernobyl-like amusement park at Bakhmut, which I never knew about. And so I'm going to have to mute that, but you can see them flying past the amusement park, past what may have been the, I guess you could say the Palace of Culture, perhaps. We can also see that destroyed T-90, and we can see the drone flying under the bridge. We can now see all of the destroyed buildings. I believe this may have been somewhere near the railway station. And after the battle has pushed all the way through the city, now we get to see how badly the city was destroyed during all of the 8 months of fighting that occurred to take the city itself. And practically everything in the city was completely destroyed. This church appears to be the only thing that got out of it somewhat okay. But all of the Khrushchevka blocks, all of the smaller houses, have practically been destroyed to where they'll have to be demolished after the war, or they've been reduced to their foundation, like some of the Khrushchevka blocks you can see right here. We can also see a Russian flag right there flying over one of the buildings, and it now appears that they're flying the drone through one of the parks in the center of Bakhmut. And it's amazing to think that that this drone is flying over in 1 minute and 13 seconds what the Ukrainians held for, I believe it was 8 or 9 months at this point. 1 minute and 13 seconds of drone flight covered the entire city, and it took the Russians 9 months nearly to take that from Ukrainian forces since the beginning of the battle. Think of that, and imagine that for a minute. That's how well the Ukrainians held this city. It was 9 months. 40,000 Russians were killed in the attempt to take this city, and it's the most costly. It is the bloodiest battle that has ever been fought in the Ukrainian war. And it stands a true testament that these destroyed buildings exist in the state they're in, that the Ukrainians defended the city to the point the Russians practically reduced it to rubble to even try and force the Ukrainians out. And those Ukrainian soldiers that we just saw in the last video in the 93rd were there for 9 whole months, holding the city until the very last chance. They did an amazing job. It was an incredible battle. It was a well-fought one on the Ukrainians' end, and the battle still goes on. Not in the center of the city, but around the flanks, where this battle will now be decided for once and for all. Where we saw here on the southern flank, near the canal zone, the 3rd Brigade was clearing out Russian forces here and making sure to take control of this area. Also, I'm going to have to mute that, but we can see the 3rd Brigade moving across the canal. They're now on the other side and advancing forward through the taller grass and towards Russian positions. We can now see them right over here on the left side of the screen near a Russian dugout. We can see them tossing in a nade. Or that may have just been a couple of guys hanging out there. And now we can see a grenade exploding in that dugout. We can now see them continuing to move forward, further away from the canal and into the, I guess you could say, heartland of this area of the southern flank and continuing to take it. Amazing to see, impressive, of course, to see as well that these guys are continuing on and continuing to push it home and retake land that the Russians fought so hard to get, and now they're losing it so easily. We're now going to be moving on from the Battle of Bakhmut and the news we saw there, because of course the battle is largely carrying on as usual. There is a little bit more resistance in the northern flank, but it does appear that while the Russians have been able to fortify the southern flank to a small degree, this is not really posing that much of a problem to the 3rd Brigade, which continues to advance. advance. We're now going to be moving on into the area of Syorka Balka, where we saw a Russian soldier walk into a grenade, and then nobody helped him. Typical Russian stuff, but I thought I would show it again. We can see the Russian truck right there. We can see a whole bunch of Russians running out of this burning rubble over here, and to the truck, and we can now see a bomblet on its way. The bomblet then explodes on the road, right there, taking out 2 Russian soldiers. And we see one guy who's kind of scooting around, but another guy, he doesn't appear to be in that good of shape.
Damn.
We can see him just kind of hanging out down there, and nobody comes to help him.
Now that part's not surprising.
That's not really surprising, but it's always important to show that out of that whole Russian squad, nobody came to help that guy. He was just stuck there, and he would have to deal with it on his own. We're now going to be moving behind the lines to Novoselivka, where we saw a Slovenian APC, a Valak, in use by the Ukrainians. 20 of these were supplied, and this is one of the examples. And I'm going to have to turn that down. We can see it driving by, and I got to be honest, it kind of is like a LAV in a way. It kind of reminds me of one, but a smaller version of it. And so with that, that's the end of that little clip. Once again, great to see the Slovenians provided some Valak APCs to Ukrainians, and hopefully that helps them to continue fighting on the front line. We're now going to be moving on down into the area of Volodar, where we also saw a Russian jet, an Su-25, firing off a rocket barrage at Ukrainian forces in the distance. We can hear the jet flying in. You see it roar right over, tilt up, and then fire off its rockets. It's now taking a hard left bank, popping off its flares, and making sure to get out of there. Russian forces have had a very hard time levying a large amount of their air power in the war due to the Ukrainians having air superiority due to impressive ground air defense forces. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and on to the next one in the area near Pavlivka, where we saw that the 28th Brigade was hard at work making sure that the Russians that were being supported by those Su-25s on the ground wouldn't be able to call in further support. Also, we're going to mute that because I feel like we're about to go into a, a GoPro commercial, where you're about to see like some epic surfer or something like that. But we can see Curtin Company is presenting to us pretty fun time. We now see them loading up the Carl Gustaf and driving BMP-2 through the field. We now see another tank in operation, and we now see the autoloader loading a shell. We now see the BMP-2 firing off its gun. And we can see them hitting Russian forces in the area. Spicy.
Aha, Gaston.
Aha, Gaston. And we can see them hitting Russian forces inside of these buildings here. We can see with their tank firing as well. And we can see its shot come in over here to the left. We now see the BMP-2 continuing to fire. We're probably about to see the drone footage of the impacts here in a second. We can see right there. We now see their tank firing once more.
Look at all that orange, like gunpowder or whatever, like going all over the ground.
Yeah.
Is that rust from the barrel?
Actually, I think it's the kind of charge. I think, and I once again, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the color that cordite makes when it explodes. I don't know, though. I don't really know for certain, because if you look at, for example, the Iowa firing its guns, and let me get a color picture of it. Iowa firing guns, images. You'll notice that after the battleship fires and the residue is just there, the cordite kind of burns like this weird orangish color instead of it being like solid white. Which is interesting. It's really neat, and I don't really know what the explanation is as to why it burns yellow. It may be the sulfur in the powder that makes it burn yellow. That would be my best guess. But I think that's why we're seeing that kind of like orangish yellow smoke, is because it's the cordite. But I don't really know for certain. And so with that, we're going to be continuing the video. Some folks are saying nitrogen dioxide. It may be. Driving in Loon said cordite is white smoke. And that's what I'm saying. I may not be right with that. So correct me if I'm wrong. But we see the tank continuing to fire. We see its shells landing in the general area. We can now see the shells landing in the general area. Chapter 2, the strike. The tank started to fire even more. We can see them firing off their Carl Gustavs as the tank continues
Why do they keep
to fire.
showing the same clips over and over?
I don't know. It's a very good question. We can now see white smoke coming from the tree line. Number 15. The perfect shot. This shot landed right into the window, taking out a Russian squad. This is great for Ukraine, as that means that they'll be able to push the Russian forces out of the area a little bit easier. So now we can see their FPV drone coming in on a Russian trench as well, and now we can see one guy posing. Man, he was flexing, odd flex, but okay. And so with that...
Whoa, it says U.S. Army on that?
It says U.S. Army. Oh no.
The Russian propagandists are going to be yelling and screaming.
Let's see. What? Oh, damn. I'm being pushed into a rock and a hard place, Matthew. What do I say? Obviously, this guy has nothing to do with the Ukrainian army.
He just simping for the U.S. Army. That's all.
He's just simping for the U.S. Army. That's all. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip in the Pavlivka area, and we're now going to be moving on to the area of Doroshianka, where we saw a T-72B being destroyed in the Zaporizhzhia front.
Here we can see the Russian T-72 biting the dust. Russian T-72 tanks are very vulnerable in the wild, being susceptible to fires and other kinds of ills. Here we can see the T-72B burning as the crew has abandoned the sweet creature.
The T-72B, a.k.a. the oven.
That's it, dude. Call that thing a Dutch oven. But anyways, we're going to be moving on behind the lines, where we saw that the Ukrainians were able to shoot down an Orlan 10 with small arms fire. And this picture is really interesting, actually. Well, actually, it's a video. Oh, wait a minute. That's not the one first. We're supposed to be showing the other one first. Let me get to this one. So this is the Orlan 10 that they recovered after they shot it down with small arms fire. There's the clip or pictures of the Orlan 10 being captured. What's interesting, though, is that when they shot it down, it fell on a minefield. So they actually sent one of those octocopters out there to go grab the Orlan and bring it back to them. And we can see that right here on film.
Валь, що делають агродрончики, коли йдуть дощі? Помагають військовим.
Here comes the octocopter with the Orlan below it.
That is a strong drone.
Man, that thing is strong.
You wouldn't want to run that into someone's head.
We now see the drone detaching the Orlan and now flying over the people on the ground, and we can see them moving out of the way as they cower in fear of the might of the octocopter, and I would too, honestly.
Could you imagine, like, flying that drone through the Russian trenches and having, like, jump all out of the way and everything?
Dude, this thing would be like Mothra from Godzilla if this thing showed up over your trench. You just hear, it sounds like a V8 up there, and the Russians
have like, go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead first. You go ahead first.
I was about to say, have like the Scooby-Doo music playing and like have that thing flying down the trench with the Russians running like Shaggy and them in front of it.
Like, Zoink Scoob, I think that thing's coming right for us. Run, Raggy, run! And then they start running away from that thing. Dude, I would be terrified of that thing if I heard that flying over me. It sounds like a freaking monster. And so with that, that is the last bit of news that we actually had in the Zaporizhzhia front. And now we're going to be moving on into Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And without further ado, here's the speech. Watch and enjoy. Speech. And he's also got that cool shirt on.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Щойно провів ставку. Питання очевидні. Передова, наш захист, наші активні дії, забезпечення наших воїнів зброєю та снарядами, технікою. ППО і захист від терору. Протягом дня отримую доповіді щодо ситуації в Дніпрі та ліквідації наслідків чергового удару. Це суто звірство. Російська ракета, балістика проти лікарні та ветеринарної клініки. Абсолютно хворі істоти. Станом на цю хвилину внаслідок удару загинуло 2 людей. Мої співчуття рідним та близьким. Розбір завалів ще не завершився. Понад 30 людей поранені, серед них 2 дітей. Ми зробимо все можливо, все неможливе, щоб пришвидшити постачання в Україну більшої кількості та якості систем ППО. Це буквально щоденне питання для роботи з партнерами. За цей тиждень маємо значний прогрес і щодо сучасної авіації для України, яка стане ключовим компонентом нашого захисту в повітрі. Ми рухаємось в модернізації оборони швидше, ніж можна було би передбачити ще півроку тому. Важливу доповідь на ставці зробив генерал Сирський щодо відповідних напрямків на Донбасі. Наші воїни роблять там неймовірні речі, і кожна відбита у окупантів позиція, кожна зайнята нашими силами висота – це нові аргументи для світу, що Україна може перемогти. Дякую кожному воїну. Таврія, Одеса, Північ, захист Харківщини, увага кожному напрямку, оснащення техніки бригад наступу. Міністр оборони мені доповів щодо результатів зустрічі Рамштайну. Хороші результати. Провів сьогодні також нараду з міжнародниками щодо нашого руху в НАТО більш концептуально. Ми маємо використати і використаємо кожну можливість цього і наступного місяця, загалом цього року, щоб наповнити реальним політичним змістом наші відносини з Альянсом. Була важлива розмова із сенатором Гремом. Це один із найбільш впливових досвідчених сенаторів США. Ми обговорили ситуацію у нашій обороні на сьогодні, наші потреби найближчого часу. Я дякую за розуміння України. Готуємо кілька міжнародних звернень, щоб збільшити підтримку нашої держави і нашої боротьби за свободу. Підтримку як в колі наших традиційних союзників і партнерів, так і в країнах глобального півдня. Провів нараду щодо нових санкцій проти тих, хто сприяє російській агресії. І ще одне. Сьогодні Грузія відзначає День Незалежності. Я вітаю увесь народ Грузії та бажаю бути разом з нами та усіма іншими народами Європи у вільній, мирній та об'єднаній європейській родині. Я бажаю цього всій Грузії і тим частинам вашої країни, які поки що в російській окупації. Поки що. Грузія є однією з давніх і поважних історичних сил, і цю силу не здолати, я в цьому впевнений. Окупант програє. Каумарджос та вісупал Сакартвелос. Слава Україні!
Now with that,
Героям слава!
Slava Ukraini, and that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, wrapping up today's news summary of the war. And I thank you all so much once again for watching this summary. Of course, we are highly honored that so many of y'all have joined us tonight to cover the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And if you do enjoy, make sure to subscribe because, of course, it really does help us to keep this channel running. This is not the end either. The fun's only just begun. We're about to be moving into our question segment. And just to address this, just in case of people do or do not know, because I actually did see a comment in our comment section about this. Someone said, do I have to pay to have a question answered on this channel? And the answer is no, you do not. This channel, and the premise of it, is that it is completely free to watch and is completely free to interact in it. I do have to say this, however. We get 23,000 live chats a night on average on this stream, and a decent amount of those are questions. Sadly, due to the overall number of live chat questions, we can't answer every single question. And so if your question is not being answered, I'm sorry about that, but I hope you do understand, just due to the amount of live chat questions, we can't get to all of them and address them individually. However, if you do want to support this channel, and the only way to support us is through Super Chats, you can support us through a super chat. If you do, we of course make sure to recognize each and every one of you, whether you have a comment attached to your super chat or not. And if you have a question attached to it, we'll try and answer it the best we can. Of course, the best we can. That does not mean it's going to be a perfect answer, and that doesn't mean it's going to be the best answer, but we will try. And of course, that helps this channel to keep on running as well. And I want to make this specifically clear because some people have also been under the misconception that we are, and because I also saw someone say this in our comment section, that when we say we thank you for helping this channel to keep on running because you make it possible, someone said that that is actually us begging for support. And I'll tell you this, We do not beg. There are viewers that have been on this channel ever since day 4, or even before that have never sent in a super chat to this channel, and I would never expect them to. A super chat is something that you can decide to do voluntarily, and whether you want to support this channel or not, or whether you want to just sit back and enjoy, is completely on you, and that's the beauty of this channel, is that you can sit back, enjoy, and not have to spend a single minute, a single second, watching an ad or listening to a sponsorship. We never have sponsors on this stream. We never have ads on this stream either. And so if you want to watch absolutely free and not even have to worry about ads or sponsors, that is for you to care about. If you want to support this channel, however, you also can, and you get to decide how much you find this channel to be worth personally. The super chats, you can actually vary the amount from anywhere to $1 all the way up to $500, which I believe is the max. So, you know, if you find the channel worthwhile and you do appreciate it, you actually get to decide how much you find this channel worth. No one's forcing anyone to support the channel. For some reason, there are people out there who think that is the case. Nobody forces anyone to support this channel, and if you want to, you can. Beyond that, you can watch absolutely free, ask questions absolutely free, and we'll try and make sure to get to them the best we can. And also, like Miss Disa said, there are no memberships required as well, and we will never run a membership. We try and make sure that the stream is monetized as little as possible beyond the super chats. So we make sure that there are no memberships. There's no such thing as a membership. Everyone is on an equal playing field in the live chat. No one has a fancy looking little badge. No one gets fancy stickers. The live chat is just the same for each and everyone. We also do not, of course, run ads or sponsorships or anything like that. So really, we try and make sure that this thing is as free to play as possible. And if you want to support us, then I thank you incredibly, and we'll of course address that individually, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running. And also to address this as well, to make sure that this is clarified, because we've said this a million times and we'll keep saying it because we always want to be as transparent as possible. If you send in a super chat, that goes to support the channel. That supports Matthew and me and helps us to be able to do this as a job and keep this thing running. If you want to support Ukraine, however, you can come to our streams on Sunday night, because every single Sunday night we run a Sunday fundraiser. So far, we've been able to raise about $465,000. Wait a minute, hang on, no, I got that number wrong. What the hell am I talking about? $965,000 in support of Ukraine, and we're only about $35,000 away from reaching 1 million raised for nonprofits that have been helping out in Ukraine. And so,
but if you do want to put in a live chat question, all it'll cost you is 1 like. Not really. You don't have to press a like, but it sure does help.
I mean, hell, you can hit the dislike, because who the hell can even see the dislikes? I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Hit the like button. But still, with that, we are now going to be moving on into our polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our very first poll says, Sweden offers to train Ukraine pilots on the Gripen fighter jet if asked, and is this better than F-16s? 42% said, either one is fine to me. 28% said the Gripen is a better choice. 17% said unsure, and 12% said the F-16 is better than the Gripen. And to me personally, from what I've seen on the Gripen, I'm not sure if it's just marketing hype, because they do have a really good marketing department for the company that makes the Gripen. Very nice, actually. I think it's Saab, right?
Yeah, it's a Saab Gripen.
Saab Gripen. I have to say that the Gripen looks a little bit more durable than the F-16, but I'm not sure how the cost works out. But very cool looking. I like these a lot. So I'm with the 28%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I've got to be honest, I really love the way the Gripens look. I hate that they haven't been as successful as they should be as an export plane. No one's really bought these things. Like, only Brazil is really the only country that ever bought a large number of these. Even the Swiss, as far as I recall, ended up declining the idea of buying these, and then they went with another aircraft. I think they went with the F-18s. I don't know why, because it's a really good-looking aircraft, and it appears to be as capable as any other. And of course, you can see the only 2 pictures here that show up on the ad page is one flying over Rio de Janeiro, which is the Brazilian Air Force Gripens, and then a Swedish Gripen, because I think they're the only Air Force that uses them. They are a great plane, and you can even see that they lay out the stats here, just so that way if you're buying some for your home country, you get to see everything about them. They are great aircraft, from what we understand. And I would say that the Ukrainians would probably be in really good shape getting themselves Gripens, but really, to be honest, it doesn't really matter. As long as it's a 4th generation Western aircraft with the modern, I guess you could say, computer systems inside of it and the ability to mount and use modern weaponry the way it's supposed to be used, that's really all that matters. But I would like to rep the set for Sweden a little bit, because while F-16s are great, everyone in the world has F-16s, and the Gripen... And honestly, this will be a great PR thing for Sweden. Not to try and represent Sweden's arms industry or anything on this stream, in my personal opinion, but I think that if the Gripen probably proved itself in Ukraine, there would probably be a lot more export orders that we would see being filled for the Gripens. And we would probably see that the Saab company would finally be turning a profit on the pretty pricey development costs of making this aircraft. Because it's by no means a pushover. This thing is quite an impressive aircraft from the stats. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Medvedev says Russia would launch a preemptive nuke strike if the West provided nukes to Ukraine. And what are your thoughts? 37% said that's a bluff and pure lies. Excuse me. It looks like 29% said only Medvedev would do that. 21% said Putin would follow that advice, and 13% said unsure. And on this one, I seriously doubt that the U.S. or the West will ever give Ukraine nukes again. Maybe it's somewhere possible that we might station nukes in Ukraine, but I doubt Ukraine will ever have control over nukes in their territory ever again. That's my assumption, but that's just my opinion. I would personally say that if somehow, under some weird circumstance, that they were given nukes, that they probably wouldn't follow through on that advice. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, can you reread that prompt? Because I just got an invite to something on Steam, and I don't even know why, because that person knows I'm streaming right now. But can you reread that prompt again?
All right, and the prompt says, Medvedev says Russia would launch a preemptive nuke strike if the West provided nukes to Ukraine.
I would say, I don't even know when the hell the West would provide nukes to Ukraine, really. I think except for a small fringe of people, I think everyone's largely on the same page that Ukraine does not need nukes, and we would probably never give them nukes. But if we did, I don't think the Russians would really do anything about that, because once again, they're all talk, no show, and that's another all talk, no show thing. I mean, like, hell, they said, oh, if you give them Western planes, it'll be hell, and then we're saying, oh, we're giving them F-16s. They go, we're very angry. Please stop. It's like, well, cry about it or something. I don't know. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
All right. And our third poll says, oh, well, I flip over to it. The Kremlin demands unfreezing of Russian assets without conditions. And what do you think? One of the most unanimous polls in channel history. 95% said they are in no position to demand anything. 3% said unsure. 1% said maybe the West should bargain. And 2% said Russia is scary. Give them back those yachts. And the Kremlin is never going to see those yachts again. Those yachts are probably going to be sold off, and the funds are probably going to be either sent to Ukraine or some local government's going to steal the money. So I would say that Russia is certainly in no position to demand anything, and it's absolutely insane. And what are they smoking or drinking? But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, me personally, they'll never see that precious yacht again.
I'll take that yacht.
I'll take it. Dibs. Grabs it, just starts sailing it across the world. Man, that is honestly not a bad looking yacht at all. That's probably one of the few modern yachts I've seen where you look at it and it's like, wow, that's actually a nice designed yacht.
But really though, who would buy the yacht knowing that an oligarch owned it? And if the oligarch ever gets power again, they're probably going to come and track it down and try to take it again.
I mean, maybe. I would get it though. Like if I had the money to get this thing, I would get it. Because it's not that bad looking of a yacht. And I'm sure they probably would never really be able to get it back because, you know, there's probably going to be like a crew of 50 on this thing. And you would have to overpower the whole crew of 50 to be able to take this thing. And the chances of that happening are probably low. At least from what I would understand. But still, this is a pretty nice ship. I'm not going to lie. And of course, there's yachts like these all around the world that have been seized by Russian oligarchs. And in response to their demands to give them back their toys, I'd say no. They're not getting their toys back until they can play right. And so this thing will stay wherever the hell it is. I think this one's actually in London, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm not really sure. It could be. I'm sure that's a stomping ground for the oligarch.
Man, dude, every oligarch loves London. I don't know what it is with Russians in London, but they love London for some odd reason. So this thing is probably in London. Man.
Remember when we were in London and we were in that hotel? I can't remember the name of it. And we walked past and there was like this dude some Middle Eastern dude. He had this door wide open, like sprawled out on the couch with somebody like waving a leaf over him and feeding him grapes.
Hang on,
Do you remember that?
Hang on, we gotta go. We gotta go there because now that we're kind of getting DOXXED'd, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal to say what hotel that was.
Nah.
So let's see if we can find that hotel. It was, let's see, up here near Hyde Park, and
I think it was it wasn't the Horse Guards. That was the one that we stayed in afterward. It was the Intercontinental, I think.
Is it now? Has it been renamed to the Cumberland?
It should still be the Intercontinental.
Wait a minute, we weren't that far from the Wellington House, were we? Where in the hell's the Wellington House? Wait a minute, am I in the right spot? Wait, hang on.
Just punch in Intercontinental, it'll go to it.
No, it's gonna damage my wait a minute, no, it was down here. It was down here. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, here's the Wellington Arch. I was like, we're not at the Wellington Arch. Here's the Wellington Arch. There's the Apsley House, which is Wellington's house. And we'll talk about that.
There it is.
Yeah, so
Park
there it
Lane.
is. So this is the hotel we stayed in. The first time we ever went to Britain, it was this one, the Intercontinental. And
the only hotel with working air conditioner, I think, that we stayed in the whole place.
Yeah, in the whole of the UK, this was the only hotel with air conditioning. And I promise y'all, in the summer months, you will pay premium dollar. And also it was not that expensive back then. It was like way cheaper. I don't know why in the world that's that expensive now, but way back then, it was luxury. I mean, like, especially in like one of the hottest years that Britain's had. Anyways, I kid you not, we walked by one of these exact rooms right here, and the door was wide open, and we had just passed two people who were coming down the hall, and they were dressed up in like traditional Indian clothes. And like they were dancers, you could tell that they were like that was like their thing. And so they walked past us, were like, "Oh, that's interesting." And then we just looked into this door to this wide open room, and I swear, this is not even being made up. There was a guy laying on the bed like it was a Roman couch. He was dressed up in like full, like I would guess you could say, Saudi like nobility wear, like that all white like robe with the little I don't know what it's called, but the little hat thing with the rings on it that kind of holds it up there. And someone was feeding him grapes, like actually dropping them into his mouth. And there was another guy over there with like a giant fan that was fanning him. We only saw that for like 5 seconds, then we just walked on. But that was like the first thing we saw getting into London, actually, as soon as we made it out of the airport. And we were like, dang, this is bizarre. So we were like, this is insane. But anyways, yeah,
definitely
that was
interesting. Makes you wonder if you're in the right hotel or not.
Yeah, I was like, are we all right? Because like the way this guy was like just chilling in that room, I swore he probably would have bought out the whole floor. Just bought out every single room so that way the floor was his own. But that was insane. And also, to give y'all a little fun fact, because I'm sure a lot of our British viewers would love for us to hang out here in the UK for a second, the Apsley House is really cool. We didn't get to go into it, but this was actually the house of Sir Arthur Wellesley, that many of y'all may know as the Duke of Wellington that defeated Napoleon on the field of Waterloo in 1815. This is actually his house. And also the reason why he's known as the Iron Duke is because a whole bunch of rioters, when he was the Prime Minister in the 1830s, came to his house and started throwing rocks through the window. And so to make sure that that wouldn't happen again, he had iron shutters installed for every single window that they could close. So that way when the rioters came around again, they couldn't break out all the windows with rocks. They would just hit, the iron shutters. And so he got the name the Iron Duke. That's where he got it from. He didn't get it from Waterloo. But the Apsley House, we didn't get to go into it, but it was really cool looking. And I would highly recommend that if y'all are ever in London and y'all ever get the chance, make sure to take a look at the historical sites. Also, the reenactors were out there. Gotta appreciate that. Rep the set. As some people out there would say, they're LARPing, but in my honest opinion, and also knowing the reality of reenactors, probably 3 out of 5 of these guys are veterans, because almost everyone I reenact with is a veteran. But anyways, really cool place. I'd highly suggest checking it out, because it's nice, and also it's a very interesting bit of history. And so, with that, I hope that does give a little bit of an interesting story about that fairly well, although we were talking about yachts, and I don't think they should get them back. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll finally, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, our last poll says, Medvedev says talks with Ukraine are impossible as long as Zelenskyy is in power, and what are your thoughts? And I would say flip that statement around. I think talks are impossible as long as Putin's in power. But nonetheless, that's what he said. 84% said Medvedev is king mouth runner, 4% said unsure, and 12% said Medvedev is right on this one. And I think he is king mouth runner. If something happens to him, Medvedev might be back in power, though, unfortunately. It's hard to tell, but he certainly knows how to run that mouth. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, I'm telling you, Medvedev can run that mouth. Man, what that mouth do? It run. It don't stop. But I gotta tell you, he's just, honestly, at that point, I just say he's running his mouth. And clearly, the reason why there's been no grounds, no steps forward being made in negotiations is because Putin is unrelenting that while he's losing a war, all the demands must be met like the Ukrainians are unconditionally surrendering, which means that they'll be making no ground until Putin's not in charge. Although, to be honest, I don't think they'll be making any ground under Medvedev either. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we are moving back to our super chat questions. And our very first one is from Jesus UCSB, who puts in a $50 super chat. And thank you very much, Jesus, for that support once again. He says, Hola, Jesus UCSB is in a bad mood. He is currently taking up a special mission for LSA, and if you know what I mean, love Ukraine and LSA Army. Jesus out.
Oh man, I'm telling you, he's angry. Oh man, real angry. Oh man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. I really do. I get no respect.
But I thank you so much for the support, Jesus UCSB. I don't actually know what you're talking about right there, but whatever you're doing, I wish you the best of luck. I don't know what it is, but thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Of course, from our favorite Lee Spring Army tanker, that was a tanker in Vilseck, Germany. Incredibly cool to know, and incredibly neat to know that we have folks who have come from all walks of life on this channel. And of course, Jesus UCSB, you're our tanker, but there are so many special and unique kinds of folks that watch this stream. We have people who do rally racing, we have F1 racers, we have folks that work at SpaceX, we have folks that are former CEOs or are current CEOs watching the stream. We have all kinds of people watching, veterans. We even heard that there may be people who were in the intelligence circles or may still be watching right now. And I gotta say, to each and every one of y'all, y'all are the fabric of this channel and what makes this Lee Spring Army so unique, with all of y'all's interesting stories and colorful backgrounds that give the Lee Spring Army the kind of broad and interesting variety that makes this community incredibly unique and incredibly special. And I got to thank y'all all so much once again, like you, Jesus UCSB, for adding so much to the Lee Spring Army through y'all's combined experiences. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, Jesus UCSB, for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and up next, we have a $50 super chat from Devin Gray. And thank you very much, Devin, for that generous support. He says, I think he meant to say live, but it went LLVE. But he said live from Abilene, Kansas. Slow Ukraine, and keep up the good work, gentlemen. And thank you, Devin.
And thank you, Devin, and slow Ukraine. And we will be making sure to keep up the good work until the war ends. And I want to see if I can find Abilene just by the raw eye, and I don't think I will. The naked eye is more so the case, but I don't think I will. Dang, where in the world is this thing? You know what? We're going to type that in. Abilene, Kansas. This ain't Kansas, sugar. Wait a minute. Hold up. Oh my god, I was looking in Nebraska. No wonder I wasn't finding it. I was looking in Nebraska.
We went through there, I think.
Yeah, we did. We actually went through Kansas and Nebraska, both going out west and coming back from the west. We actually took Interstate 80 coming back, and we took Interstate 70 going out there. So we actually did pass Abilene. And I gotta see. I swear there. Hey, wait a minute! Hey, dude, this is the town where the Dwight D. Eisenhower Presidential Library was.
Really?
Yeah, this is where he was born.
That's wild.
That's wild.
I like this place.
Dude, I remember driving by. I remember we were all riding in the car, and I saw the sign. It was like somewhere like right here, and I was like, oh, crap, the Presidential Library's here. And y'all went, whatever. And then we just drove past. Man, I hate that. What in the world does his Presidential Library look like, by the way? Is it nice? I think that's incredibly cool that presidents get libraries after they are the president.
That is cool.
I mean, that's really neat.
And there he is. He had his own billboard out front.
Hey, look at that. It's even got a picture of him and everything.
Very nice. I like that.
Matthew's favorite president, by the way, just in case you all are wondering why Matthew's so hyped up about it, he is Matthew's favorite president of all time.
Yes.
My favorite is actually Teddy Roosevelt, in case you all are wondering. You know, and so, still, man, I like this. Whoa, look,
Oh,
looks
dear.
like they got some stuff from overseas and brought it back. Let's see here. It looks like it's largely like a chapel and maybe a couple of exhibits, maybe showing what his home looked like growing up. But wow, it actually looks like this thing gets updated fairly regularly.
It's a very nice museum. It reminds me of that Fort Benning Museum, the military one.
It kind of does, doesn't it? I gotta say, I'm liking
And it's
this.
not Fort Benning anymore, actually. They renamed the base to something else.
Really?
Yeah, pull it up. I can't remember what they
on.
named it to.
What is it being renamed to? Let me go down here. Maybe they've updated it on the map. Let's see. Benning Hill still exists. Fort Moore?
Fort Moore.
Fort
Yeah,
Moore.
that's what they renamed it to. Now it's going to screw me up, so when people say Fort Moore, I'll be like, where's that?
I think everyone's probably just going to end up calling it Fort Benning because you can't reverse that. I think everyone still calls Cape Canaveral, although it's been renamed to something else officially. So I think folks will just keep on calling it Fort Benning because honestly, that's going to confuse the hell out of me if anyone says Fort Moore. I'm going to be like, where is that? Kansas? And they're going to be like, no, it's in Columbus, Georgia. I'm going to be like, no, that's Fort Benning, man. And honestly, that is so weird. I didn't even know they renamed Fort Benning. And everyone I've talked to that talks about Fort Benning, they still call it Fort Benning. Like, I think we were talking with Jay Bagwell, and he brought up Fort Benning, and that was like 5 days ago, and he was still calling it Fort Benning. But also, by the way, I got to give a plug, just in case y'all are coming through the area. Y'all have got to check out the National Infantry Museum here at Fort Benning. It's still called Fort Benning on that marker. But this is a great museum, an amazing one. And it looks like National Infantry Museum. It doesn't say it's at Fort Benning, but still very impressive museum going through America's military history from start to finish. I believe this is actually the War of 1812 right here, perhaps, maybe.
Very cool. It's like I remember almost all these exhibits at this point. And
Oh,
hopefully
yeah.
when y'all go, if you haven't been, the little combat simulator will be working. Because when we went, it was messed up.
That thing was busted. It really was.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's a Harley Davidson WLA. I love these things.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I
That
like
is
that.
that is really cool. It's even got the sidecar. Man, that is neat. And then we can see the M16A2. Wait a minute, is that the M6? Let's see. It says. Oh, it's talking about the
M203.
grenade launcher right there, the M203 grenade launcher. It doesn't say anything about the M16 though. I think that is an M16A2 if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then we can see an M249 saw. We can also see an AT4, which is being used in Ukraine right now. We can even see an M4 carbine as well, and that looks to be an M240B. So really cool. I mean, like it's a great museum. I don't even know why I had to break down the weapons there, but it's a great museum. I'd highly recommend y'all checking it out. It goes over the history of the U.S. military from beginning to now, and the exhibits are well put together. I mean, you won't find exhibits like these in most museums unless if you go to the Smithsonian, and honestly, even the Smithsonian doesn't have exhibits that are on the levels of these in some instances. So I'd highly recommend it. And also, I think if I remember correctly, on this diorama, they have the bloodstained boots of a soldier here. I think it's either on one of the, I guess you could say, mannequins, or it's in a display. I forgot specifically where. Wait a minute, I think... Nope, it's not that one. And also, man, I think that soldier sitting there going, hey, here you go. Here's the vomit kid. And that kid's about to eat that nasty omelet thing that comes with the MRE.
It looks like a bag of Skittles, though.
Yeah, it was a bag of Skittles, but just imagine it's a vomit for a minute. That makes it funny. But anyways, really cool museum, and I'd highly recommend y'all checking it out. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, hello to Abilene, Kansas. Really cool to know that you live in the town that Dwight D. Eisenhower was born and raised in. And really cool to know that such greatness came from such a small town in the middle of nowhere, really, in Kansas. And thank you so much for enjoying the work we do. And thank you so much for supporting us and appreciating this channel enough to help us to keep this thing on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next we have a $33 super chat from Howell Rose, and thank you, Howell, for that support. And they said, Enforcer Matt, tactical nukes are a myth. A nuke is a nuke, and pick a question, please. I think the tactical part refers to the size of the nuke, the yield of it.
And yes, it does. And I thank you so much for the support. But I will, a nuke is a nuke. But tactical nukes are smaller. That is true. Funnily enough, though, like what we call a tactical nuke now, I believe is about the size of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. So they're not really that small. You know, it's not like they're like little 500-pound bombs or anything. They're still pretty sizable. But they're not as I guess you could say, devastating as an ICBM would be, with multiple warheads inside of it with massive megaton yields for each warhead. So they are a little bit smaller, and that's why they're called tactical, because they're supposed to be hitting a smaller area on the front lines where the fighting's occurring. But in all honesty, it is a nuke nonetheless. It doesn't matter whether they used a intermediate range or a short range missile, it would still be a nuke nonetheless. And so I'd agree with you on that aspect, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and we will be making sure to grab a live chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and the live chat goes to Philip Fixes, who says, are there any Western tanks with autoloaders, and why does America not use them?
There are Western tanks with autoloaders. The Leclerc is probably the first one to come to mind from the Western European world. Let me, I'm trying to think of all the other ones. Okay, so now we have to go all the way over to East Asia. After I went through a stroke, we have to go all the way over to East Asia, because Japan actually uses nothing but autoloaders. Both the Type 90 and the Type 10 use autoloaders, and I'll show you all the Type 90. And some of you will be going, hey, that looks like a Leopard. It kind of does, a little, but not really. But it kind of does look like a Leopard 2A4 a little bit in my mind, and I kind of justify it that way. And then the Type 10, which is honestly one of my favorite main battle tanks to come out of East Asia. It is really good looking. I've got to be honest with y'all. They hit it right on with the design, at least the exterior design of the Type 10. It is a very sleek looking main battle tank.
I gotta say, I like it too.
Yeah, it's a good one. The Japanese did a great job on this one. And it is also an autoloader as well. And they only have a crew of 3. And also the Leclerc only has a crew of 3 as well. And I'll get y'all a Leclerc tank, not the F1 driver. And we can see the Leclerc right here. And that is also a 3-man main battle tank with an autoloader. Autoloaders have been experimented with in the past by the US Army, as well as the German Army and the British Army, but it was largely decided by all armies involved in any kind of experimentation with autoloaders that autoloaders could be a little finicky, and it would be better to, I guess you could say, take down the stress and workload of the crew to add in that 4th loader. Although it can kind of slow down the loading process and make it to where it isn't a continuous rate, where at a certain expected time you can expect the gun to be reloaded, and with a Type 10, that is exactly 4 seconds in between one round being fired and the next one being ready to go. That is an expected thing, and it will never change. But with a manual loader, like with a normal loader in the crew, that can actually change. Like, the loading process in the first few shots could be small. It could be 2 to 3 seconds, maybe, if you have a really fast loader. But as time goes on and more rounds are fired, that loading speed will get slower. It could be about a round every 7 or 8 seconds. But that's still, in the efforts of it, the tank ever breaks down or has an issue, you have a 4th guy there to help out with getting things done, instead of just having 3 guys who are working their asses off and really getting nowhere. Also, another interesting fact is that some tanks, like the Stridsvagn 103, which I'll show you right here, also known as the Wedge, actually had a 3-man crew. But what's wild about this tank is that it could actually operate in combat conditions with 1 man operating the entire tank.
That's pretty cool. I guess it's flat as a pancake, that's why.
Yeah, believe it or not, this thing's only 3 feet tall.
I believe it.
Yeah, that thing is tiny, and somehow they packed in a 105mm gun into that thing, and they also added in hydraulic suspension.
Huh.
So really,
that's somewhat interesting. It seems kind of pointless, though.
well, the reason why, and also I just saw something down there that we're not showing, the reason why they added in the hydraulic suspension is because the gun is actually fixed in place. There's no way to move that gun. It just points straight forward. So if you want to aim downwards, you have to tilt the whole tank down.
That's, I don't like this tank.
Yeah, it's a little odd, but what's crazy about it is that when the Swedes designed this thing, they designed it to where the entire tank could be operated from any position in the tank. So the commander could actually be the gunner as well, because it really only needed 2 men to operate. But then they made it a 3-man crew, once again, so that way they would lessen the burden of the 2 crew members if something was to happen to the tank, like it broke down or something like that. So then they just threw in a 3rd guy into the tank to help out. So, pretty interesting little design there, pretty interesting features, and I hope that does address that fairly well as far as autoloaders go, and which ones are autoloaders. It's actually a very small amount of them, especially compared to all of the tank designs that the West has ever produced. but they are very interesting, like the Leclerc and the Type 10, in that they are very unique, and there hasn't really been that many problems with them, at least in operation. We've never really seen a lot of the autoloader series tanks that are made in the West in combat, so we don't know if they'll develop any kind of problems there that are noticeable, but at least on the training fields, they do fairly well. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that does address that question fairly well and give it a rabbit hole treatment. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Luis Vasquez. And thank you very much, Luis, for that support. He says, just a thought. I think the counteroffensive was about to start, but as soon as Sunak approved the delivery of Storm Shadows, it was pushed back to attack more ammo depots, communication nodes, etc. And it's a good move.
And I thank you so much for the support, and I'd honestly agree with you there. That may have been the case. They may have pushed back the counteroffensive because the Storm Shadows are giving them abilities to soften up the Russians better before the counteroffensive than when it will happen. So that may be the case. I would actually agree with you there. That may have been why the counteroffensive has not happened yet. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and also throwing in an interesting point that nobody has brought up yet. And I haven't thought of yet either. That was a really good one. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that further well. And also, Matthew, Dead Crow remind me of some very big news that happened today that affects folks here in America.
What's that?
General Milley's retiring.
Oh, yeah, I knew about that. Has he actually been, like, removed, though?
I don't think so yet, but they've already gotten a replacement for him, and you wouldn't believe what his name is.
General Frilly?
No, it's General Charlie Brown.
What, are you joking?
No, I'm not. Like, his name is Charles Brown Jr., but, you know, if you make that into the shortened version or the nickname of Charles, he's Charlie Brown.
Oh, well.
I was like, that's honestly kind of neat. You know, your chief of staff is going to be Charlie Brown. I was like, that's actually not that bad. I don't really know a lot about the new guy coming in, but all I can say is that I'm pretty happy to see Milley go. And you know, and of course, I'm sure he's a nice person. I want to say that while I don't agree with him on a lot of things that he said as the chief of staff, he is probably a very nice person to deal with and talk with in person. However, I will say that he's gotten a lot wrong on the Ukraine war, and also I didn't really like how, I guess you could say it was under his advisement that the information about the Chinese balloons, among many other things, were kind of kept under the rug, among some other stuff. Didn't really like that because I believe that transparency is important, and a lack of transparency like that is something I do not respect. So it's good to know that he will be replaced, and hopefully his successor will be far better in the role as chief of staff than Milley was. But once again, I do want to say that people always make things incredibly personal nowadays, and while I don't really agree with him as his performance as the chief of staff, I'm very certain that the guy's a nice guy if you actually got to talk to him in person, and he's pretty relatable, among other things, because the one guy I knew that actually knew him in person and got to talk to him a little said he was a very nice, personable guy and was a very good commander and took care of his troops quite well. So I'm sure he's a nice guy, but I just didn't really agree with what he was doing, especially recently in the Ukraine war, as the chief of staff. So with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Pooker1228, and thank you very much for that support. They said, no question, just keep on. Let me make sure this is okay before I read it off. Let me send this over to the Discord.
Uh-oh, it's going to review. It's that bad, is it?
That's probably not bad. It's just I got to double check.
All right, let's check it out. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. We ain't reading that one. That was rough. But I do thank you for the support. We got to keep it PG, though. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you do make it possible, although we can't read off your super chat. So with that, thank you once again for the support. Thank you for helping this channel to keep on rolling and making this stream possible. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Marion Deemer. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support. And Marion said, glad you have not burned out yet. Love Ukraine, and Herom Slova.
And thank you so much for the support, Marion Deemer. And I haven't burned out, and it's time for me. 1 second, Matthew. I got to get ready for a speech. I haven't burned out because of y'all. Y'all are the reason that I keep going, and also largely haters are the reason I keep going as well. The support that y'all give me keeps me going, and the pushback we get from haters also keeps me going as well. Really, to be honest, I've got to say, like, people saying they love this channel and wanting it to keep on running, that really does encourage us to keep this thing rolling. But one thing that, and I don't know why it works this way for me mentally, but one thing that really does keep me running is when someone says, your channel sucks, I want you to quit. That makes me go, I don't care if you think it sucks. This thing is going to run until the end of time, and there's nothing anyone's going to do to stop that. That's honestly kind of how I operate. And you know, and I'm sure that's counterintuitive, and much to the dismay of people who want this channel to stop, you know, because obviously that would be their goal, but all that does is make me want to run this thing more. And also on top of that, and you know, and 457 days into the war, you kind of lose focus sometimes as to, well, I lose focus as to why I actually started this thing. And I remember looking back at those streams and remembering the emotions and the thoughts I had back then, why I did start this thing. I had a friend in Ukraine, and that was what was largely covered in the first 4 days of the show before this thing blew up. I had a friend in Ukraine, and the whole purpose of me running this news and gathering up information and showing where Russian forces were was to try and help him to get out of Ukraine, because, you know, from what we had been told, although it was all wrong, the Ukrainians were going to collapse, and from the speed at which Russian forces were moving, they were going to make it to where that guy lived, which was Poltava. So I was trying to tell him how to get out of there, and in the process, this thing blew up and turned into news, and it turned into covering the news for all of y'all, and then running fundraisers, and then having a whole entire community revolve around a joke, well, actually a mess up that we made at one point about Leaf Springs and having a Leaf Spring army. And it is the reminder of what this channel really started as that helps me to keep this thing going, looking back in retrospect, because the idea that at 20 years old at that point, I was somehow able to run a channel that blew up and has been able to raise $965,000 to save real people in Ukraine that we cover the news on is something to me that is unbelievable. It is certainly the crowning achievement of everything I've done in my life, and I don't want to give that up for nothing, because it's unbelievable to think that a lot of y'all have been on this journey with me the entire way, and it's unbelievable to think that we've all been able to do so much, and we continue to do so much in support of Ukraine. And that's what stops me from burning out, is all of those things combined. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, Marion Deemert, and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make this possible. And folks like you have helped us to keep this thing running and have appreciated this channel so much that we've been able to keep on doing what we're doing in the background. We've been able to keep on going to college. We're also getting ready to go to law school here in the future, and folks like you are making all of that possible so that way we can keep on doing this. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and with that being said, we're on to our next one, which goes to Kleiner Hund, who puts in a $20 super chat. And thank you very much for that support. They said, not trying to support the channel, just have a drink on me and Slava Ukraine.
Have a drink on me. Well, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. You said you weren't trying to support, just wanting us to have a drink. And I'll be honest, we don't drink. But I'll have a toast to that. I'll drink a root beer to that. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and also supporting the Drink Fund. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, of course, try to insult us as much as we can to help this thing to keep on running. But with that, thank you once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you for sponsoring a drink on you. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Butchie777, who says, good morning from the Vale of Belvoir, pronounced beaver, as we didn't like the French way back. Here's a small donation to keep you supplied in coffee and is that coffee? And it's a very interesting misspelling that I would love to read off because it's kind of funny, but kind of not PG at the same time. But coffee and donuts, I meant to say, Slav Ukraine.
You know what, Matthew? I'm going to give this one a pass. I'm going to let you read it.
Keep you supplied in coffee and dog nuts.
Okay, that was worth giving a pass. Thank you so much for the support. We'll be making sure to keep well supplied on coffee and dog nuts. I don't know what the dog nuts are for. We'll find that out later. But still, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much for the support. And also, how do you spell that town name, Matthew?
Excuse me. Vale of Belvoir.
Is that in Tennessee?
I mean, I don't know.
If it is, it's right outside of Chattanooga. Interesting. If this is it, let's take a look. On Marlboro Avenue. Man, I'd be smoking. And let's see here. Oh, not that bad. Not that bad. I like the road. It's well paved. And I love well paved roads. I'll tell you. Some of y'all may find out more about that, but I love well paved roads. I'll tell you that. I've been in the well paved roads for a long time. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for support. Hopefully we got the right beaver, if that's the way it's supposed to be pronounced, as opposed to living in Brain Nerd.
Oh, man.
Yeah, damn Brain Nerd. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. Hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running.
All right, and up next we have a super chat from Not a Teacher who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much for that support. They said that this is not an innuendo, but I have to admit, it does sound like one. So let me send this over to the enforcers for a review, so that way he'll be responsible for reading this off.
Dang. Let's see here. All right, so we're getting it right now, and oh no. I'll read it. We'll give it a pass. Shout out to Gripper Slip up in Auburn, Washington. And no, it's not an innuendo. Innuendo. Like y'all thought last time. He's just a drift racer. LOL. Love from Greenville, South Carolina. Been watching since week 1. And I gotta thank you so much for being an old guard. And I also have to thank you so much for supporting this channel as well. And giving a shout out to Gripper Slip. Hopefully, well, I can't really say that now. That would be laced with innuendo, although it wasn't supposed to be. But let's take a look at Greenville, South Carolina. You and me, we're not so much different. You see, because Alabama, really all the southern states have a massive stigma around the country for being southern states. I don't really know why. Because in my opinion, someone should be judged on the character of who they are and the actions they take, rather than where they're from. That just seems backwards as hell to me, but for some reason, some people are into that. But anyways,
Now you do know damn well why it's called the South. We're from here.
Well, I know, but still, I mean, like, every Southerner is not the same. We're Southerners.
There are some characteristics that are pretty similar amongst the Southerners.
Ah, man, what?
We all like sweet tea.
Yeah, but that's not anything to hate us for. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, dude, look at that hog.
What's it doing? Posing?
I don't know, man. That thing.
Man, that hog is.
Dude, that thing would be looking like George
that.
Costanza when he tried to take those pictures on that episode, and they got sent to the wrong person. He'd be looking like that. And man, some people have been like touching that hog's nose.
That hog looks like it's about to go, oh my.
Dude, that hog looks like it's about to be cranking. If you get it, what I'm saying. But anyway, so moving on into the other pictures of Greenville, South Carolina. And I gotta say, oh, what's this? What is this supposed to be?
That's some of that weird art.
That's some of that art that makes you go, what the hell? Like, what is this supposed to be? And then they always say art is subjective. And then you go, this looks like a naked guy doing some weird shit. And then they'll go, actually, it's like, no, it's supposed to be subjective. That's what I'm seeing. But really a cool place. This park is like the most photographed thing in the city. And also, does that look like a little Greek Orthodox church? I would guess it's Greek Orthodox. I'm not really sure. But a really cool city nonetheless. I've never actually heard of this place. And might have to check it out one day. Yeah, really neat.
Kind of reminds me of Huntsville in this area, like the Fed money's running through here.
It kind of does. We need to zoom in and see if there's Fed money coming through here. So there's a Greenville Zoo. There's smoke on the water. Uh-oh, smoke on the water. Ding, ding, ding. Smoke on the water. Let's see what else we got. Upcountry History Museum. Let's see. The Children's Museum of the Upstate. Dude, you know, I got a case of the up dog. What's
the
up,
hell
dog? Oh, man. It doesn't look like there's any reason for Fed money to be... Oh, wait a minute. Any military
the
air
airport.
wings? Yeah, but is there any military air wings out of this airport? I'd
I
actually
think I
say
saw
it
one on the
appears-
left.
One on the
That's
left.
the right.
I did... No, this is like civilian stuff. Like private planes and everything. Not really seeing any military stuff around here. It's kind of weird because it's such a nice place. You'd swear there'd be Fed money. There's two different kinds of military cities. There are the kinds that the Fed money comes through, and they make them really nice. And then there's the ones like Columbus in Georgia. And I don't even have to tell you all about that. Y'all just know about it. So with that, I hope that addresses that.
Greenville's the headquarters of Mr. Beast, isn't it?
Wait a minute, is it?
I think. I thought I heard that somewhere.
Maybe it is. I thought he was in North Carolina, though. I think he's in Greensboro.
Oh, yeah, that could be it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Because I swear he's not in South Carolina. And also, don't want to go to Spartanburg. They have a giant pit there that'll kick you in if they don't like you. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and being an elite Spring Army soldier all the way in South Carolina. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And the next one goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 5 and says, Slava Ukraine. We also have a 5 from Laura A, who says, long live Ukraine, and thank you, Enforcers and LSA. And thank you, Dupper and Laura, very much for that support.
And thank you so much, both Dupper Bob and Laura, for helping this channel to keep on running. Dupper, you've been here for ever since the beginning of this channel, helping to support this thing and keeping it running. And I got to thank you so much once again for, of course, helping this thing to keep on rolling with your consistent support. And I also have to thank you, Laura, for supporting Ukraine still and also supporting this channel so that we can keep on covering this news. And so with that, thank you so much to both of y'all once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one. I also just saw someone say that Mr. Beast got arrested. And now I know
Yeah, I
this...
asked him, I said, huh?
1 second. Mr. Beast news. Let's see. Wait, he was arrested.
What? Wait a minute, let's see that first before you say that.
Okay, so it says, moment YouTube megastar, Mr. Beast is handcuffed and arrested by cops who pulled him over in his Tesla, then threw him in a holding cell without food or water, but all is not what it seems. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. The YouTube star played on to be recruited where Mr. Beast lives to stage fake arrest, but the YouTuber into a holding cell. So wait a minute, someone pranked... Okay, this, honestly, that sounds like corruption to me and abuse of law enforcement. Apparently, it was a YouTuber that was playing a prank on him and knew police officers in that police department where he lived that had the police officers pull him over and arrest him and throw him in jail for a day as a prank. At least from what I'm reading.
Let's see the article. I can't see it.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's from the Daily Mail, so take it with a grain of salt.
Oh, well, be careful with that.
Yeah.
It might be false.
Yeah, take this with a grain of salt, but that's the article right here.
Yeah, I wouldn't put any stock in this at all.
Yeah, I wouldn't put that much stock into it. And, no, get out here. I saw that ad pop up. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, that is interesting to hear. It does sound kind of like a publicity stunt. If it wasn't a publicity stunt, and that was like a legit prank, that's got to be the most odd prank to hear that deals with corruption. You know, because you know, I'm just saying this as a premise, because of course we don't know the full story yet. But if someone got arrested by a cop because they wanted to pull a prank on you and they threw you in jail as a prank, like honestly, that sounds like something you ought to be able to sue that police department for an unlawful arrest or something like that. But I have a feeling it's probably a publicity stunt, because imagine them doing that to like a 130 million subscriber channel and then just getting away with it.
The cops are going to show up in court and be like, it's just a prank, bro. It's just a prank.
And the judge would be like, and he's guilty, death penalty. They're putting them on the electric chair. They're like, it's just a prank, bro. Pull on too. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Cheap and Cheerful, who says, great work from Australia.
And thank you so much, Cheek and Cheerful. Is that the name? Did I get
Cheap
that right?
and Cheerful.
Cheap and Cheerful. Thank you so much for
No
the support.
cheek.
That sounded bad, Mandy. But thank you so much for the support, helping this channel to keep on running. Thank you for enjoying this channel enough and finding it worthwhile to support, because folks like you do make it possible. And thank you so much once again for helping us to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5 and says, take a live chat question. And of course we will. Thank you very much, CK Bold, for that support as always. And the live chat question is going to go to none other than Rocky, who says, how do we plug the arms trade from Iran through the Caspian Sea for Russia?
There really wouldn't be a way for us to block that, actually, because there's no way we can power project over the Caspian Sea. So it's pretty much unstoppable. That kind of sounds a little bit bad, but that is largely the reality. There will really be no physical way for us to stop weapon shipments from Iran to Russia if they're going through the Caspian Sea, or even through Turkmenistan, because we don't really have any way to project military force into that area reliably. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much, CK Bull, for sponsoring that live chat, and I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Mark, General of the LSA, who puts in a $5 donation and says, I'm just being a dork. Blame Psyops. He's not here, so I'm doing my best.
Man, Psyops, I miss Psyops. He hasn't been here for a while. He's taking a break, so, you know, he'll be back in a few days, but I miss Psyops, and he will eventually be back. And I gotta thank you so much, Mark, General of the LSA, for being a dork. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing with you. Don't take that personally. But still, I thank you so much once again for the support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep on running. And no, you're not a doik, you're a general, Mark. You're a general. We ought to make dork a rank. You know, that'd be fun. That'd be funny. Give every single bot the rank of dork. That honestly would be a pretty funny one. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat for the B93, who says Saab needs to open up a factory in Asia. Everything they make would be instrumental in maintaining freedom.
I would say, yeah. I think that Saab should open up a factory in, and let me hear that again. It's East Asia, if I heard that right.
Asia. You know where.
China? China? Like, I would say, not in China. Don't trust China. Like, I really don't. I would say probably South Korea or Japan would be a good place to open up that factory. But once again, that's entirely dependent on them getting export orders, and they're not really getting any right now. So, I have to be honest. Good idea. I would say yes. But they need export orders first. And I think that the war in Ukraine and giving them Gripens would probably help to further the export orders for the Gripens. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And the next one goes to Martin Bridge, who puts in a 4 and says, Coffee Fund, take a live chat, Slava Ukraine, and long live the LSA.
And long live the LSA. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And of course, folks like you make it possible for this channel to roll. And if it wasn't for folks like you, it wouldn't be possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. We will be getting that live chat. And what do we got, Matthew?
And the live chat goes to Paul Polonsky, who says, excuse me, wow. Did you hear about the comedian from China who got fined $2 million for degrading the Chinese army? And man, that is a hell of a defamation case right there.
Man, that is, man. Dude, that social credit score is dropping.
I'd say.
Man, that day, he went down to negative 9,000 or something like that. I would have to be honest. I don't know why a Chinese comedian would think they could get away with criticizing the PLA, because, you know, think about it. Everyone knows what China's like, and then the comedian is going to make fun of a government organization and expect not to get away with it. I mean, you know, to me, it would be a kind of a common sense thing that if I was a Chinese citizen living in China, I would not make fun of that kind of stuff. But that is pretty wild to hear. And once again shows that the Chinese are not necessarily great people. I mean, after all, their leader is Winnie the Pooh. And did y'all see how addicted Winnie the Pooh was to honey? It was like crack for him, you know, and I think that's not a good thing to have in a leader, is someone who must find honey. That is very dangerous thing. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $2 super chat from Mamba Mentality, who says, for the future, and bots be gone. And he puts in a roach with a fire extinguisher next to it.
A roach?
Like a roach.
Like a roaches. But still, thank you so much for the support. and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for giving us a roach with a fire extinguisher. I've got to be honest, I hate roaches. Don't really like roaches, but we will take that roach. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Jason Carpenter, who says, your comments on the European Parliament finally declaring the Holodomor famine a Soviet-engineered genocide, ?
It's about time, because I believe in the United States, for the longest time, we've recognized that as a state-sponsored genocide, or a state, I guess you could say, manufactured genocide. So I think it's a long time coming, and they should have made that announcement decades ago, in all honesty. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, we are all out of super chats. So, of course, we are moving on to our live chat questions. But first, before we get to any of those, really good questions. We have the Morse code of the stream. Mark Hodges, CFA, JP's Gone Fishing, Cliff Simonson, Earl Bernew, and Paul Schultz solved it tonight. They said tonight's Morse cipher says, Ukraine will keep fighting until Russia is pushed out of Bakhmut. Glory to Ukraine, and long live the LSA.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that correct. Congratulations for getting that correct as well. And that was actually, believe it or not, the message. The Ukraine will keep fighting until the Russians are pushed out of Bakhmut. And then they'll keep on fighting, because they're just that good. And so with that, thank you all for deciphering that Morse code message on the 457th day of the war. And of course, always making sure to get it right. Y'all get that right every single time. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our first live chat question goes to Adam Thames, who says, excuse me, just how much ground have the Russians taken and then lost since day 100 of the war?
So, since day 100, interestingly enough, they actually lost all of this up here by about like day 30-something. Kind of funny to think that was only day 30-something that they lost all of that. So since day 100, they've lost everything in green down here in the northeast and also down here in the south. That's everything they've lost so far. So still a pretty sizable chunk, about maybe a quarter of everything they've held down here so far. And then once again, you add that on to what they lost in the first 100 days, which was about half of everything that they controlled at the beginning of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have another super chat from Mark, General of the LSA once again, who puts in a 5 Canadian and says, not so fast, Enforcer Matt. And Mark, like I said, please call. Well, first of all, I get no respect. Please call our customer complaints department at 1-800-THE-ENFORCER. Please don't call that number. I don't know what number that actually goes to. But you'll have the honor of hearing some wonderful Cisco IP hold music.
Do you call up General Milley with that? He's like, who the hell got this number? It's a Pentagon number. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. And I guess it wasn't that fast. Also, I saw something, and I was wanting to address this real quick. Random name said, I love how these guys are obese on humble pie. Now, I was wanting to address that real quick, because we actually have people, believe it or not, and and I think it's always an interesting thing to make a note of some of the criticisms our channel gets, and sometimes to explain probably where those criticisms are coming from, is that throughout the war, I've gotten far more assertive on what I'm saying and what I'm thinking, because one thing I've learned through the war is that no matter what I say, or how, I guess you could say, malleable I am to input, people are really just going to bash us because of our age. And so throughout the war, I've just become far more assertive, because no one gives, like, truly, not even trying to do a Rodney Dangerfield thing here, nobody really gives us any respect for our inputs. Like, that's actually truth and reality. Like, someone could come in here and they claim to have 30 years of military experience, and they'll say something like, oh, Ukraine's going to manufacture a nuclear weapon out of the water in the Dnipro River and then fling it at Belgrade. And I'll be like, I don't know about that. And then they get offended. And then they go, oh, you're 21. What do you know anyways? Or, it's someone who, like, plays Xbox all day and just goes around to weed shops or something. And they live in, like, I don't know, Ohio. And then they want to say
Akron.
what the world's like. Yeah, something like that. And it's like, well, it doesn't really sound like you really know how life works anyways, because you, like, live life on a video game and then also smoke weed all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, it's like when you're, like, high all the time, it's like being drunk all the time. It's like, I don't really think you're around to know what reality is, so that's one thing that has made us a lot more assertive. Like, if people actually just listen to our inputs and weren't always trying to push back on them, I honestly would be a lot more apt to listen to other people. But we always get so much crap for being 20. Well, for me being 21 and Matthew being 22, that we, have just gotten tired of it, honestly. So we just kind of, sit there and go, this is what we think, and that's what it is. Because people always want to tell us what to think. And it's like, if you want me to say what you think, then maybe you ought to go run your own show and say what you think. Because
I'm personally still open to other opinions, honestly. Because, say what?
I'm open to other opinions, sure. But like, one thing that I'm not really, like, open to is sitting here and acting like I'm not going to have an input on stuff, and just sit there and go, well, this is happening and everyone tell me what you think, because for some reason, because I'm 21, I can't have input on this stuff. It's like,
That's true. That's true. I just listen to all the opinions and then I come to a conclusion. I think, I know that's not what you're trying to say, but I like to hear everything out first and then come to a conclusion. But if somebody then bashes you for the conclusion, you reach after that. That's, I think, what you're having a problem with.
yeah, that's largely the thing, because you could sit there and be like, yeah, like, that's an interesting point, but I disagree with it for these reasons, and it's just your opinion. And Matthew, you've seen it all because you've banned them all. They'd be like, you snot-nosed kid, you little idiot. It's like, what's up with the heat? It's like, I'm just giving you my opinion. It's your opinion that you just gave me. Why don't I give you heat for that? And then, you give people heat for that, and then, they sit there and go, oh, you're so rude. You need to know how to treat viewers. It's like, no, you need to know how to, like, approach something and have some manners about it. Because
that'll never end as long as you're in the public spotlight. It'll never end.
No, that'll never end. But it always flabbergasts me about how people just act like that and then expect to be treated like they're royalty or something. That always gets me, like, all the time. Like, it doesn't get me where it makes me, like, like, down in the dumps or anything, but it just baffles me how people do that. And that's also why we've largely changed from when in the beginning of the war, I would really listen to a lot of folks, to now, whenever I hear something that does kind of sound harebrained, instead of trying to listen to, well, harebrained in my opinion, instead of trying to listen to it, I'd be like, I just don't really think that's the way it is. But with that, and also CME4PC said, common sense is not age dependent. Oh, I can guarantee you. As a cashier at Publix, I can tell you that some of the stupidest people I ever ran into were from every age bracket. Really, there's nothing that determines whether someone's smart or stupid, or well put together or not well put together, well organized or not. And that's something that I see it a lot, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me either on that, is how people always act like they can discriminate based on age or race or where people come from or something like that, and come up with an idea of whether they like someone or hate them, just based off of superficial stuff, really. And it's always bizarre to me, because people who even like to try and go out of their way to act like they don't do that, they do that as well. And it's like, it's like, why in the world not judge people on a case-by-case basis? And that's something that I don't think anyone does. I think everyone generalizes everything. But anyways.
But I will say this. I'm not sure the enforcer agrees, but I do recognize, because of our age, it's impossible to have as many experiences as older people have had. While I will disagree with this, though, getting older does not mean you become wise. It just means you have more experience. And that doesn't necessarily equate to being wise by simply having experience.
And I would agree with that. And also, I'll be honest, some experiences are completely useless. Like, like, if you experience going and clubbing for like 10 years, that's great. But how does that, like, really weigh into, like, grand strategy or anything like that? And also, on top of that, in case if some of y'all don't know, the reason why sometimes I say things and it's like almost said with fact is because I grew up almost around nothing but veterans. Matthew could tell you that. And I was always sitting around them and going, so what did y'all eat in the army? And then they tell me what they ate and how they slept and what they did and how things made them feel, what it was like to kill folks, and usually then one thing that's always very big is that folks who ever killed in the military, ever shot anyone or killed them, even whether it was well justified or, whether it was not so much justified, they never really talk up their military service all that much. That's one thing that I've seen a whole load, is that they'll always be like, yeah, I was there, and it's like, oh, what'd you do? And then they'll eventually say, like like one story I remember hearing, some kid had bombs strapped to him in Vietnam, and the VC pushed him right under the barrier fence, and he started running through the compound, and I had to shoot that kid. And I remember that story because that was one of the most messed up stories where someone had to do something to save everyone's life. And I was like, dang, that's messed up. And, and that guy, actually, his name was Bill. He shared every single story I think he had of his time in Vietnam. And that's where I get a lot of my basis and input off of what I say is largely based off of the stories of veterans that I talked to and pretty much heard their whole story of service. And so then I work off of that. So that's also why I'm a decent amount opinionated on stuff like that and say, this is how it is, this is how it isn't, because I've heard so many stories of how it was and how it wasn't. And almost all of them are the same, whether they were fighting in the Second World War or the Gulf War. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, because I'll be honest, we used to be very humble. I would say nowadays, even in my opinion, because I like to be critical of myself and look at things realistically, I've become less humble over time because people just love to bash us because we're young. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. With that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Russ Rizzo, who says, wait a minute, this is a Rodney impression. I got to send this over to you.
Oh.
Let's see. Copy, paste, and send. There you go.
So let's see. We're waiting for it. Oh, man, I went to see the... oh, yeah, I thought that was the same one for a second that we got last night. Oh, man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I went to see my doctor. Doctor, every morning I get up and look in the mirror. I feel like I'm throwing up. What's wrong with me? He said, I don't know, but your eyesight's perfect. Oh, man, I'm telling you. And I'm ugly, too, real ugly. Oh, man. I went into the veterinarian the other day with my dog. I tried to get him fixed. They said, we're here to see your dog now, and they said it to my pit bull. About me. Oh, man, I'm telling you. I get no respect around here. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope you enjoyed the Rodney, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Mark, who says, this is just two to the next one. $5 super chat again, really annoy you. And up next is $7 super chat. Mark says, don't worry, you'll get over your youth. And I have to say, the Enforcer is afflicted with youth, and I hope he can recover very quickly from the syndrome, from the disease that is youth. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's a terrible affliction, it's a terrible disease. People out there just want to disrespect you because you're young. I don't really know what's up with... I really don't know what's up with that. Because it's like, what does it matter if someone's young as long as they're out there and doing everything they can, going 110%? I don't really know what is up with people who, have, a problem with that. Because honestly, whenever I see anyone who's really young and is really out there doing stuff, I'm always like, go get them. Because, and I'll tell y'all a story. This one's a small one, but this is, just like a part of how I look at things. When I was 12 years old, because we lived in the middle of the country then, so I didn't really get to hang out with a lot of friends because there were really no friends around. But I would play video games, and a lot of the games I would play were like military sim games, like I guess you could say the closest thing they would be to is like Hell Let Loose or something like that nowadays. And all of the groups would always be like, you have to be 18 years or older to be in this group. And I always never got that as a 12-year-old. I was like, why the hell can I be in that group? And now that I'm, 21 and I still play those games every once in a while that are like that, and then I hear like a 12 or 13-year-old kid playing this game, he's like trying to sit there and get everything right. He's like, we're taking fire from an MG-34 bearing 036. I'm like, you go get him, kid. It's like, go join a group or something, go join like the little Milsim group or whatever. Go have fun, like kids going places. Don't push them back or anything. Because, hell, I don't think at all that people should judge people based on their age or anything about them for that matter. They should judge them on how competent they sound and how competent they are when they actually take action. Because, actions speak louder than words, and I think that actions, of course, should weigh far louder than words, but people also should judge you off of what you say. And so with that, also, Eric White Nelson said, video games, waste of time. Movies are, too.
Facts.
I mean, really, every kind of entertainment is a waste of time. You could always be on that grind set, baby! On that grind set! And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Loren Nutsky, who says, "Shouldn't you young guys be hunting some gators or snakes like the folks on Swamp People?" Now, Enforcer was just talking about the people in the South don't have the same stereotype going on. Loren said, "Hell no, they do."
Oh, well, they kind of do. I mean, yeah, because I'll be honest with you. Stereotypes in the South are only used, like, people in the South actually get along fine until someone pisses someone else off, and then the stereotypes come out. Like, you know, if you're like one of those country hick kind of fellas, you know, oh, well, dagnammit, doggummit. Oh, I guarantee you, if you piss someone off, they're going to start mocking that guy. Well, daggummit, dognammit, you know, all that crap. But yeah, there are, like, set stereotypes in the South. Honestly, all of them are negative, but they do get used once people get pissed off. But beyond that, people actually get along fine down here. It's just that it really, honestly, the only time I can ever think of people making fun of each other down here for, like, who they are or anything is in traffic, like during road rage. That's the only time I can think of down here. But yes, the Cajun people in Louisiana, they're honestly culturally different than everything else in the South. I don't even, like, they are Southerners, sure, but I don't really think they classify as Southerners. I think Cajuns are honestly their own cultural group, because unlike the rest of the South, which had a lot of English influence on it, the Cajun people of Louisiana are actually French. Well, largely French-based in their culture, and that's why Louisiana has parishes instead of counties, and a whole bunch of other interesting stuff about Louisiana. So I would say that they honestly need to be classified as a different cultural group than the rest of the South, because the rest of the South is kind of English-centric. Louisiana, well, I wouldn't say English-centric. I actually say more so British-centric, Scots, Welsh, English, Irish, all of those. But the folks from Louisiana are French-based in their culture, and so I think they honestly need a different cultural group, like the French Cajuns or something like that. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from none other than Jesus UCSB once again, and thank you very much, Jesus, for that support. He says, "Mission accomplished, ha 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 ha. Enforcer Matt knows, he knows. Matt Jesus UCSB and LSA Army." And Jesus, I'll have to take your word for it that a mission is accomplished, and whatever that mission may have been, you'll have to tell me about it later. But thank you very much for the support.
And I thank you for the support, Jesus UCSB. I don't know what the hell has happened, but good job on the mission accomplished, I suppose. And thank you so much once again for helping this thing to keep on running. Of course, from our favorite LSA tanker. And also, Matthew still has that model in that display case. And I actually went into his office today, and I gotta be honest, that thing is a looker, Matthew. I think that actually beats out some of your other models.
I mean, I have a Ferrari F40 over here. I have a LaFerrari.
Oh,
I mean, I will say for the...
Don't flex.
Oh, well, I mean, I do have a LaFerrari after all. That's a $3 million car, a 1/18 scale. But no, it goes really good next to the Blackbird. And also I showed Jesus the Blackbird in that video I sent him. So it looks really cool. I have like 2 shelves of military models going on.
Matthew has military models. I just end up collecting guns. I don't know what's up with that. I just think they're neat. So I actually have the AK, which will... I'll be honest with y'all, we're not going to review the Tommy gun. I'm going to actually try and get rid of that thing and then get it replaced with something else that we can make a video on. Let's see. And also, what the hell happened in the live chat? I don't know. I don't know what that means. Anyways, I'm trying to figure that out, man. Like, when the world started that. One second, let me go up to the top, figure out what that is. I'm gonna appeal that one because I don't know what that is. So we'll figure out what it is, I suppose. Like what's going on there. But anyways, I would say that tank model is amazing. I, of course, end up collecting guns. We're gonna get rid of the Tommy gun. We're gonna replace it with something else. I do have an AK. I also have a. It is a replica. Well, actually, it's a clone of a Colt M16. It's an original M16A1 clone. And I really love the original look of the M16s, the M16 and the M16A1. I think they look really neat. So I have one of those. Also have that, pump shotgun, the Mossberg 500 that y'all have heard in the microphone before, and some other stuff. I think y'all know about the 1903 and let's see, the Krag Jorgensen. and those I think are most of them. But yeah, that's what I do. Matthew collects model cars. I collect rifles. I like rifles. And honestly, I got to be honest with y'all. My preference thing, like I know that pistols are like have their own use, but honestly, I just don't like pistols. I don't like shooting pistols that much. Like I'll like sure pistols have their like use, but I don't know what's up with it. Like I like to be accurate. And like with pistols, you can't be that accurate that far. So, you know, that's like a huge thing to me. It's like, you know, it's like you can't. And anyway, I don't know. It's not really that fun to me to go like shoot them in the range. Honestly, like if y'all have not and y'all be interested in just trying out new things and hobbies and stuff, clay shooting is probably one of the funnest kinds of shooting. It is the funnest kind of shooting you could do. That's when you get like those orange discs that look like a dinner dish and you like fling them up into the sky and you shoot them out of the sky with a shotgun. It is super fun. It's the funnest kind of shooting you can ever do. And I would heavily suggest that if you've never been able to do that, go, of course, do it safely. Don't just run out there, you know, with no experience whatsoever and try and shoot a gun because you probably get yourself hurt. Go, like, figure out how to shoot a gun and then go do that because it is so much fun, and especially with friends, because you can make it like a competition and have a lot of fun with it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for support, Jesus UCSB. And with that, hope you all got to know a little bit more about our like hobbies and interests, I guess. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Joe Little, who says the LSA should try a simultaneously stream of YouTube and Twitter Spaces at the same time.
What? Wait a minute, reread that again. Reread the line.
The LSA should try a simultaneous stream of YouTube and Twitter Spaces at the same time.
Interesting. That's an interesting
I'll be
idea,
honest
Joe.
with you. After we went on that Mario Nardwall or whatever his
I
name
think
was,
it was like what? Yeah, it was like Andrew Nawal or something like that.
it was Mario. But after we tried going on that show and I saw how Twitter Talk Spaces work, I really do not like the concept of a Twitter Talk Space. It's really not my thing. You really can't control it very well. And also, you really don't know much about the background of the people speaking, which makes it kind of a little bit, sketchy, in my opinion.
Remember when we were in there and that one guy was talking so good about the mainland Chinese, and we were like, what is this guy? Let's look at his profile. And he was actually a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and no one made any mention of that whatsoever.
Yeah, nobody cared. They just kept listening to him like he was credible.
Yeah, I'll tell y'all this. I'll tell y'all this right now. I know, like, and of course we don't get into politics on this channel, but I detest communists and fascists outright. They're both the same on different ends. You'll end up getting yourself killed under one of those forms of government. And the fact that guy, nobody ever made a note while we were in that talk space, that guy was a member of the Chinese Communist Party. And he was telling everyone on this talk space, there was tens of thousands of people watching this thing live. It was way bigger than our stream was. And nobody was given the disclaimer. By the way, we just want to let y'all know, this guy is a member of the Chinese Communist Party. So what he is saying may be skewed due to an inherent bias. Nobody ever said that or anything. And I was like, that's really shocking because, whether you, of course, we don't get into politics at all on this channel, but, when you're having people who clearly have political views on that are in an extreme in one direction or the other, I feel like it's necessary to inform your audience that they're either, like, for example, this guy is actually a member of the neo-Nazi party, or this guy is a member of the Communist Party. I feel like you need to let people know that, so that way they're not just listening to this guy and taking him at face value like he's a reasonable person. Because, like, hell, that's just wild. It's like...
You remember when the host of the show would just, like, pop in at any random moment when somebody was talking and be like, so does that mean they're going to nuke Ukraine? Does that mean they're going to nuke it?
Wait, dude. No, you would just hear something like this. You would just hear, yeah, I think that's valid. Or something like that. Or you would hear, like, the trickling of piss, and you would just hear, hey, wait a minute, I want to hear that one again. It's like, what the hell are you doing over there, man? And then remember, there was, like, the whole, like, I think it was, like, in parentheses, the alpha male thing. There was somewhere in there somewhere. I forgot if it was him or someone else. Oh, man. I gotta tell y'all, like, as a personal preference thing, like, if you're having to tell people, like, you're, like, an alpha male or something, it's like, no, you're not. Because why in the world would you have to tell people that? Why in the world wouldn't you just have your actions show that, That's what I think about that. And I was like, that's honestly cringe. So I'm gonna have to be totally honest. I was like, that's kind of cringe. And also, man, I just gotta, like, you know what? I'm gonna level with y'all for a minute. I'm gonna absolutely level with y'all. I find the idea of being, and you know, well, we'll hold that off for a little while.
Yeah, it sounded like it was about to go a weird direction.
Yeah, it was kind of going to go in a weird direction that we're not about. So with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have an $8 super chat from Mark, General of the LSA. Once again, he says, "I'm bashing you for your age, you young whippersnapper."
And I thank you for the support, Mark. I do. And I'll be trying to get older quicker. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, I saw, I think it was unnamed agency, undisclosed location, said you were naive for expecting full transparency in Twitter talk spaces. And I'll be honest, we got the invitation to go on there. I had never been in one, and we went into it completely blind, which was a mistake. I should have done some research on the fellow first before we went into it. But you know, you live and learn, and I do not like Twitter talk spaces.
And, okay, and I'll actually say this. We'll name drop for a second here. We were in the Twitter space, and we hadn't even been moved up to talk. Actually, we were never moved up to talk, although we were invited to talk, and then they just blew our segment away, and so there was no point of us even being there. And we were waiting to go up to talk, and then Keemstar shows up, and we were like, I was like, "Matthew, Keemstar is here," and he was like, "Hold up, what?" And I was like, I think we might be, like, you know, nothing wrong with that kind of content if you watch it, but that's not really what we do. And I was like, I think we may be in the wrong place. Like, you know, I think we might want to leave. So, you know, we sat there for a little longer, and then he disappeared, and we were like, oh, okay. Then, you know, time went by, we never got to talk, and then we just left and ran our own show. But after that experience, we were like, yeah, we might never do like anything on Twitter. That was honestly like the one thing where we made a guest appearance where it pretty much decided for us we probably weren't doing anything with guests ever again, either inviting them on our show or going over to other stuff, because it's kind of a little rocky in the background, either trying to be a guest on someone else's show or having a guest on, because sometimes you can tell that the guest had expectations of how it was supposed to be run, and it's not really being run the way they thought it would be, or they don't like the format, or you go on to a other person's thing as a guest, and then we end up doing the exact same thing. So we were like, yikes, you know, that's rough. We might bring guests on in the future again, though, but you know, that experience was rough enough for us. It kind of scared us away from the guesting for a good while.
Angry Penguin said, "Matt, we don't belong here." And seriously, what we were saying, like, once I saw that guy pop up in the Twitter talk space, I was like, I think we ought to bail. I think we ought to bail now. And we're like, yeah, we ought to bail. And that's when we finally just headed out.
Man, I got to tell you, that scared the hell out of me, because I was like, what in the hell have we gotten ourselves into? It's like, I was like, he's here, there's members of the CCP here, like, what the hell is this? This is like a free-for-all, like a PvP. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a super chat from Russ Rizzo, who puts in a 5 and says, "I don't try to intimidate anybody before a fight. That's nonsense. I intimidate people by hitting them." Mike Tyson. And Russ Rizzo, thank you very much for that $5 super chat. And I will say this. He said that at one point, and then later he said something about you win the battle before you even go into it by intimidating somebody. So he said like both things, but you know, in reality, he intimidated the hell out of people
I'm playing
before
both
they went to the
sides.
fight.
Hey, don't talk when I'm talking. I play both sides of the fence, so that way I come out on top.
I'm just kidding with you, Andy. It's so that.
Have you ever killed a man?
Remember when he asked that on that podcast and everyone got freaked out?
Yeah,
Those
those
all
podcasts are wild with him on it.
Man, those podcasts are insane, man. Like, even though he's like chilled out now, I would still be scared to be around him. Like, I'm not gonna lie. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again, Russ Rizzo, for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You remember that time when he was gonna go fight? I don't know if it was Buster Douglas. I think it was Buster Douglas. No, that was the guy that beat him. It was some other boxer. And he was in the other room next to Mike Tyson when he was getting prepared for the fight. And Tyson had gotten upset or something over some small issue. So he banged his head into the wall and like smashed the wall. So he scared the opponent so bad that he went to the ring trembling and got absolutely demolished.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that actually. And he was out there like sweating bullets before he even got up there. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I mean, that guy's got an interesting history, to say the least. I know some people don't like some aspects of his history, and I don't either. But the guy is interesting to an extent because he's kind of like out of control to an extent. You really can't tell what he's going to do, and you can't figure out if he's sane or not. He says some really wise things sometimes, which are unexpected, and then at times he says some crazy ass stuff that you're like, what? Where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's like, dang, this guy's crazy. I mean, like, honestly, though, that interview where that guy did ask that question that I'm always quoting, nah, man, the rat pizza, like, that honestly was an out-of-line question, even then. Like, it was like,
It was, yeah, I
you
think
shouldn't
so.
have asked that question. Like, even if it wasn't Mike Tyson, that was, like, the wrong time, wrong place to ask it. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 super chat from George A. And thank you very much, George, for that support. He says, I just hope you Gen Zers don't age backwards.
And I thank you so much for the support, George A. And thank you for recognizing we are Gen Zers. We are, we're Gen Zers. I don't really like to associate myself with a generation. I feel like it's a disservice, really, because once again, kind of like with everything else, like where we even live, because a lot of people like to take shots that we live in Alabama. But like with that, people like to try and make stereotypes about generations as well. Honestly, the two I can think of that are stereotyped the most are millennials and boomers. And I don't really know why, because I've met plenty of nice boomers and millennials, and I've also met plenty of terrible boomers and millennials. I don't really know why people try and make all of them seem bad or not and just throw a blanket on them. But hopefully we won't age backwards. I have a feeling we won't, because the honest truth is that we are constantly learning. And one of the things that I learned, just letting y'all into a little bit of my personal thoughts and ideas, one of the things I learned is that one of the worst things you can do is try and listen and follow a group of people. And that's just something in my personal opinion. Like, it's something that I don't like. I don't like the idea of other people, like a group of people, being able to tell me what I can and can't do, regardless of what that group of people is or what they stand for. Really, I don't really like the idea of that all too much, unless if a reason calls for it. And so that's kind of why we actually don't allow certain things on this channel, because I don't like it much. And it's kind of a learning experience, kind of maturing as we grow. And of course, a lot of people will be saying in the future, oh, well, you have to be in a group. You don't have to. And I think that's a really stupid notion in society, is that you have to be a part of a group. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't really think you have to be a part of a group to be a moral person. I don't think you have to think a certain way or do certain things to be an upright person. You should just naturally know, and it doesn't require you to have to, rep the set to folks or anything like that. That's just silly.
Rep the set.
You gotta rep that set, man. That's on the grind all the time. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again, George A, for the support and helping this thing to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have yet another super chat. This time it's from Joe LaBrosse, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Joe. That is very generous of you. He said, have a nice day. And also, it'll be a very nice night.
And have a nice day. And thank you so much once again, Joe LaBrosse, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you help this thing to keep on rolling. And so thank you so much once again. I hope you have a nice day and a great night as well, because I think it is night where you are in Canada as well, because it's just right up above us. So it's like the same time zones. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope that does address that fairly well. And I hope you have a great day and a great night. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and back into our live chat questions. We have one from, let's see here, Bobo Uzella, who says, what is the first target you'd like to see the F-16 liquidate?
First target I'd like to see an F-16 liquidate is a Russian squad holed up in a house. The reason being is because if they can hit a pinpoint target of a Russian squad holed up in a house in front of Ukrainian infantry, that is going to be the biggest thing that aircraft will change in the war. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other stuff the F-16 would have to do before it got to that point, but once it got to that point where it smacked a paveway right into a house and leveled that thing with a whole Russian squad inside, that's when you know the war has been changed because of that F-16 in some way, shape, or form. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from the Sunken Grave, who says, does Ukraine have gas masks and other protection against a possible gas or chemical attack?
I think they do. I think they have some PPE equipment for their soldiers, but I don't think they issue it a large amount because in the modern world it's expected that, well, at least for Ukraine, it's expected that if chemical warfare occurred, the U.S. would probably be getting involved at that point. They would also probably be getting that PPE equipment rather quickly after that, but I don't really know for certain. I have a feeling that it may still be standard issue. It's just that we never physically see it anywhere. So with that, I hope that does address it at least the best I can. And
It goes to Marcia Tucker, who says, what is most needed for air defense for cities like Dnipro, Kherson, etc.? Patriots, F-16s, or something else?
Patriots would probably be needed for air defense. They have 16. Oh, sure, it would do air defense. But that's more so frontline air defense, fighting enemy aircraft in the sky or destroying enemy air, ground-to-air installations. The Patriots would be more so needed to protect places like Kherson and Dnipro from incoming missile attacks. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to John D., who says, what Western weapon system would you and Enforcer like to see the West get to Ukraine after F-16s, and thanks? And for me, I would have to say that I'm a little bit torn on sending anything a little bit more advanced than an F-16, because we have to also prioritize our own national security, and we don't need to send anything that could potentially fall into the hands of the Russians, which then hand it over to China, which is the people we should be really worried about. So I would say F-16s and then wait and see what happens from there. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to largely agree. There really isn't much more I could think of to give the Ukrainians beyond the F-16. That's about as advanced as it can get, and really the last thing we haven't given them in the overall category of arms that we could possibly send them. One thing that I think is very important that some people have kind of been losing focus on is that the United States is the #1 nation in the world as far as military arms goes because we emphasize national security. We do not even give our allies the advanced variants of aircraft that we are using at this moment. They get older variants of them, or they get variants that they can modify themselves. We do not give them our best stuff. And that's something very important we have to remember, is that for the United States to maintain its cutting edge worldwide and to make sure that we can face down our rivals on the field or even indirectly face them down by giving other folks our stuff, we cannot give them the ability to get a close-up look of our best equipment like the F-35, the F-22, or even some of the advanced surface-to-air missile defense systems like the THAAD or the Thor systems or anything like that. So I think the F-16 is about the last thing we could send. Beyond that, we would just start meshing around in the categories that we've already sent them and sending them stuff we haven't yet. Like, for example, actually, hell, we pretty much sent them everything we could on the ground. I mean, hell, we could start sending them ships, but I don't know how they would use. Hello? Uh-oh.
Got a little bit of lag there. I think we're back.
Oh, yeah. Oh no. And so with that, we're on to the next.
All right, and the next one goes to Lottie Reckless, who says, when or will Ukraine send a mass drone by air and sea attack on Sevastopol?
I would say a mass air and drone attack on Sevastopol could be at any moment. That isn't really like a time-dependent thing. It just really depends on the weather being clear. So whenever the weather's clear, an attack like that can happen. Hate to be that vague about it, but it really has had no rhyme or reason or schedule to the attacks we've seen already occurring on Sevastopol. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to AF Kaplan, who says, do you have any information or further information regarding the transfer of nuclear weapons by Russia to Belarus?
At this moment, we do not. And so I would have to declare ignorance on that. And we're on to the next one.
And that fellow over there in Belarus said that he's getting them. But, that's what he said.
That's what he said.
Allegedly. But our next question goes to Esel, who says, do you think continued cross-border attacks into Russia will extend the battle line, causing the front lines in Ukraine to thin, giving the counterattack a better chance of success?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's why the Freedom of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps has been conducting those attacks. And so, yeah, I would largely agree with that. That's probably the reason why they're doing that. And what better people to use than Russian nationals, because you get plausible deniability is every single time you use them, because they're not actually Ukrainian. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Trister1, who says, when Russia uses a SAM like an S-300 as a surface-to-surface, isn't that then more like a ballistic missile, so could Patriots take them down?
Can you reread that one again?
When Russia uses a SAM like an S-300 as a surface-to-surface, Isn't that more like a ballistic missile? So could Patriots take them down?
Yes, they could. They could shoot down an S-300's missile. Absolutely. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who asked the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Bobo Uzala, who says, besides the FOR/RVC, are there other partisan/anti-Kremlin groups that we should be aware of?
Reread the line.
Besides the FOR or RVC, are there other partisan anti-Kremlin groups that we should be aware of?
There isn't, that I know of at least. I only know of the RDK and the FOR, and those are really the only Russian groups. And I've seen some things said about them. Of course, we try not to go into them here, because talking about the specific politics of a group, especially when their politics can kind of reflect certain levels of politics, especially here in America, where there is always a political firestorm about everything, it is pretty tough to go into. The Freedom of Russia Legion, though, and the Russian Volunteer Corps are two separate units as far as what they do. Of course, I'm not going into it here, but you can always try and pull that up and research it yourself. And also, it's been making the circles on some news channels a pretty good bit what the Russian Volunteer Corps is, because it's been causing some controversy here in America. But one thing that I did hear that was really interesting was from another YouTuber, actually. I won't mention who they are, but they said that if they're being used, if those guys are being used to kill supposedly the exact same guys as them, then that's good. And I would have to agree with that. Not getting into exactly what they are, but I would agree with that. That's a pretty good way to use them, and that's what we originally said on that stream that night, is that no matter who they are, as long as they're supporting Ukraine through their actions, we back them up. And so that would just make sense, because obviously, you know, and y'all can find that YouTuber. Y'all be able to find him pretty easily. He's one of the larger ones, kind of a similar size to us, covering this war. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And, of course, it is the end of tonight's stream.
We have one more super chat.
We do?
This one goes to Joe Little, who puts in a 5 and says, I am really impressed in what the LSA has accomplished. IMO, the LSA had been blocked by YouTube for new subscriber recommendations.
Really?
Oh, I think he's talking about a shadow ban, but, you know, I'm not really sure at this point.
I don't know about shadow bans. I gotta be honest with you, I don't think we have been shadow banned, because the reason being is that we actually gained 5,000 subscribers in the past 2.5 weeks. We went from like 115,000 to 120,000 subscribers, and we're continuing to grow at that rate. So I don't think we have been shadow banned. I think it's just that sometimes our videos don't really hit the algorithms right for some reason. But I still have to say that I'm completely impressed by what the LSA has been able to do, because one other community out there, like, they're really, from what we've been able to tell, no other community out there has fundraised like this one has. We have saved countless lives through the fundraisers that we've run, through Doctors Without Borders, through Razum for Ukraine, through the millions of others, the dozens of others that we've run. We have saved loads of lives over there, and I think that is a crowning achievement of this channel, is that we've all been able to raise $965,000 in support. And if it wasn't for the LSA, that would have never been possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Joe Little, for the support. And thank you once again for always being a old guard on this channel, and always making sure that the flag of Ukraine and the Lee Spring Army continue to fly, and so that way this stream can carry on. And so with that, it is the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to subscribe. It makes us incredibly happy when folks subscribe, because of course, it puts a smile on our face and lets us know that people enjoy what we do. We do this 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, never missing a day, and always covering the war news, and also going through a question segment as well. We also make short war summaries, so that way if you don't have time for a live stream every night, you can always watch the short war summaries, which show some of the highlights of the day's activities. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, and of course, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, Slava Ukraine, and 3 more days, Papa.
3 more days.
Yes.
The Lee Spring